January 8th. Welcome to the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors meeting. We're going to go ahead and get started. First, I'd like to say that we just returned from closed session. Liz, is there anything to report out at this time?
Yes, with a motion by Supervisor Hemmingson, second by Supervisor Cowan, the board voted with a 5-0 vote to defend the action Belcher versus Del Norte County et al., case number 118 CV 7379 RMI.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, please join me in a moment of reflection. Thank you. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, normally we take up at this time the election of the board chair and nominations and election of the vice chair. I'm going to read really quickly, assuming that I'm not going to be chair again, which is nice. But I'm going to read really quickly the State of the County address. And we normally we do this every year as part of our policies. But I want to go through it real quick. But it's not so quick because there's a lot that happened in 2018 that I think we need to reflect back on and really look towards our staff, our board members, and the community for all the great work that took place in 2018. I'd first like to thank my fellow supervisors who have endured a challenging year and have stepped up as leaders to bring a voice to Del Norte County, to our federal and state legislatures and agencies. It takes strength and fortitude to stand up to naysayers and those that only wish to degrade others in the name of progress. My hope is that we can continue to move forward addressing important county goals and accomplish projects in the face of adversity in 2019. Del Norte County has struggled with financial stability for many years. We anticipate challenges to continue as effects of legislative decisions by the state and the governor require more and more financial commitment by local government. State mandates and the effects of new laws will no doubt limit what we can realistically accomplish with general fund dollars. However, Del Norte County, with the assistance of partners like the City of Crescent City and local tribes, have addressed important needs that may not be flashy, but are a foundation of this community. In review, the county has experienced changes and challenges over the last year, highlighted by many positive accomplishments for those communities. Here's some of them. Del Norte County was the focus of a feature film that showcased the finest river in the world and demonstrated the hospitality of our community as for businesses and ventures with visitors. Filming of Bird Box at various locations in Del Norte County has placed us on the map for feature filming and location shots. Approximately $1 million was spent in Del Norte County as a result of the film production. In cooperation with the Pacific Shores Homeowner Association, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife in Del Norte County, a cleanup took place at huge expense at the Pacific Shores subdivision. In addition, a watchman quarters was established to reduce and avoid future illegal dumping. Approximately 200 tons of garbage and debris was removed from the area and properly disposed. Del Norte County and the City of Crescent City, along with the City of Rikuzen Takata, Iwate, Japan, formalized and celebrated the establishment of a sister city relationship. The relationship is the 105th in the state of California. 2018 marked multiple trips by delegates to Japan and to the United States by city and county representatives, establishing the foundation for future international initiatives towards emergency preparedness with emphasis on tsunami awareness, cultural exchange, student exchange, and economic development. This relationship also resulted in the invitation by the government of Japan to the city and county to be part of the World Tsunami Awareness Day hosted by the United Nations in New York, where Marion Score addressed the United Nations on our history, preparation, and resiliency around natural disaster. Chairman Howard and Supervisor Cowan traveled to Washington, D.C. and met with a number of legislators legislators, including the President of the United States and key cabinet secretaries, to further ensure county goals and priorities for funding long-standing community infrastructure needs, including last chance grade and other programs, are recognized and pursued. These continued efforts create personal relationships and ensure representation at every level and will continue to make a difference. In partnership with the Crescent City Healthcare District, the City of Crescent City, we worked through the year with Assemblyman Woods to develop a draft legislation we feel will be a big improvement in financial transparency among not-for-profit healthcare systems throughout the state. Although the Community Benefits Bill currently lacks language to define unreimbursed cost of medical services as the Medicare allowable rate for services at non-critical access hospitals, we can work with state legislature to ensure hospitals define their cost of care. I would particularly like to thank Supervisor Cowan for getting this discussion initiated last December, and Dr. Greg Duncan and Mayor Ensko for all their efforts to bring us to this point in bill creation. Delaware County Board of Supervisors voted to support the Crescent City Harbor in establishing a revenue stream to provide funding for much needed debt servicing and future improvements that will maintain a very important part of our economic and visitor serving communities. Voters ultimately agreed and Measure C was approved to support the harbor's future. In partnership with the City of Crescent City, 3 county departments, and individual leadership by many, we were able to move a significant project forward to connect West Park Mobile Home Park to our community service area. Without completion of this project, the county's CDBG funding would have been curtailed for another year by the state. Community Development Department staff, Delaware County RCD, and Delaware County Farm Bureau worked diligently to reverse the state's decision to list the Smith River Basin as a medium priority basin under the State California Groundwater Management Act. 2 years of efforts by many resulted in Smith River Basin being listed as a very low priority. Good job, staff. County Building and Maintenance staff initiated and completed a large portion of the refurbishing of the Recreation Department gymnasium. The project was supported with very little funding and resulted in augmented heating, cosmetic repairs including sheetrock, paint, trim work, entry floor, hydration station, advertising, scheduling of electronics, and safety railing. The project is a significant step in improving infrastructure that supports our county's children's programs as well as provides a safe and clean space for residents to recreate. The Delaware County Airport Terminal Construction Project, required in order to ensure continued commercial air service to Delaware County, was initiated in 2017 with the bulk of construction in 2018. The project leverages approximately $17 million in federal funding and should be open for business in February 2019. The project, along with many key staff, played an important role attracting new commercial air service provided by Contour Airlines, helping to complete one of the goals of has199.com project adopted by our community leaders many years ago. The Board of Supervisors continues to support the improvement of Highway 199, 197 in order to ensure safe highway systems serving the county from the east. The unfortunate challenge to this project and subsequent delay is unacceptable when it jeopardizes the safety of our residents and visitors. The county will continue to work closely with Caltrans and the Transportation Commission to fund safety improvements along 199, 197 to improve safety in this very dangerous connector to our community. The Delaware Board of Supervisors continues to work closely with Caltrans, Congressman Huffman through the Congressman's Last Chance Grade Stakeholders Committee to ensure ultimately that the county has a new alignment around Last Chance Grade. The county's continued presence on the Stakeholders Committee, presence in Sacramento with Federal Highways Administrations and transportation agencies and Washington, D.C. transportation officials to ensure Last Chance Grade realignment will be a priority. It is important we continue to work closely with the responsible agencies in order to complete this project as expeditiously as possible. With $15 million secured just in 2018 to start geotechnical and biological work on the new alignment, this project is well underway to defining an alternative route. The Board of Supervisors addressed the ever-changing role of recreational and commercial cannabis regulation through a first-of-its-kind county working group made up of citizens on both sides of this highly controversial issue. With considerable assistance of county council, working group members, county staff, and the board, we diligently waded through details of effective ordinances which would best fit Delaware County and carry forward the vote of the people. Ordinances related to taxation were passed in November. Personal cultivation and recreational use, retail, manufacturing, and commercial cultivation were adopted in 2018. The Board of Supervisors adopted a balanced budget in 2018 that guides county services and provides for funding programs and services through June 2019. The Community Development Department has completed a number of projects in 2018, including the Best Maxwell Safe Routes to School project that resulted in new curb, gutters, and sidewalks along El Dorado Street, sidewalk completion on Harding Avenue, replacement of significant culverts for Fifth Passage on Holiday Mine Road and Rowdy Creek Road, and several miles of chip seal on prioritized county roads. The County Road Department, with $600,000 plus in new funding from Road Repair and Accountability Act in 2017, completed 17 miles of new road improvements. With the support of the county, our advocacy organizations such as CSAC and RCRC helped to defeat Proposition 6 to ensure the County Roads Department will not be short of $1 million in much needed funding to move forward. We have joined efforts with our senators to focus on the No Place Like Home initiative to secure $75,000 in planning funds to help address the growing issues around homelessness in Del Norte County. The future of Del Norte County is bright for us and our children. New businesses have found their home here. We see continued rebound and innovation of established businesses. We are recognized internationally, and we have overcome the ever-growing rhetoric that has filtered down to even our small community. In closing, I have touched on just a few county-related projects, significant issues, and developments during 2018. I don't have time to address all these day-to-day successes of our staff, our department heads, and board members who deserve recognition for their teamwork and get-her-done attitude. We will continue to seek partners with other agencies and local tribes to support vital community needs, as we do not receive nearly enough revenue to address everybody's issues. Be assured we will strive to provide the best services we can to address short-term and long-term needs proactively. It is my sincere hope that future boards will continue to support all the great public-private projects brought forward in the future and continue to demonstrate why Del Norte County and our citizens exemplify resiliency in the face of many challenges. Thank you, everybody in Del Norte County, for sticking with us over this last challenging 2018. We will now move forward with the nomination and election of the chair of the Board of Supervisors.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Supervisor Cowan for chairman for 2019.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the table. Public comment?
Counter motion.
Yes.
I'd like to nominate Supervisor Berkowitz for chairman of the board.
Okay, seeing none, public comment.
Westfall, thank you. Still proud to be in District 1 under Supervisor Roger Gitland. While living in Central Washington, an area that was devastated by the logging industry going away, the movers and shakers in that small community in a town called Leavenworth put their differences aside, came together to create a Bavarian village. The place is special, magical, and prosperous. Here in Del Norte County, there's just too much divisiveness. Chair Howard, that was a nice state of the address, and it sounded very glowing. But you wanted 2 terms as chairman of the BOS at a point when Supervisor Gitland really should have been in that chair. And the 3 of you, Howard, Hemmingson, and Cowan, banded together to see that Chair Howard remained in the chair for another year. Jerry, you've been in the chair many times. Lori, it looks like you're going to be there next. And I predict that it will be fodder for the newspapers. So I'd like to suggest that instead of just changing the deck chairs on the Titanic, get over your fear of nominating and electing Berkowitz or Gitland. We've watched them accomplish much with little help from you 3. We're ready for a positive change. And I would like to see the conflicts that have been so prevalent between Gitland and Cowan come to a stop. So please consider my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have just a question of clarification, Chair Howard. Is this public comment in general or public comment related to the election of the chair?
The latter.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more public comment, we have a motion second on the table. Kylie, please pull the vote.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Which is the motion? Which motion?
To elect Cowan as chair.
No.
Supervisor Cowan?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
I'm going to shift.
I must say, I'm a little nervous. So our next order of business is to elect a vice chair. Do I have any nominations?
I'd make the motion to nominate Supervisor Hemmingson.
I'll second that. Any other motions? Kylie, can you please take the vote?
Are you going to call public comment?
Can I get public, is there any public comment on the motion to elect a vice chair? Seeing none? Kylie?
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
No.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Chair Cowan?
Yes.
Wanna do-
Did you do me?
No, they.
Sorry, excuse me. Got to get back into the swing of things. Supervisor Howard?
You're not alone, Kylie. Yes.
And Chair Cowan?
Yes. Okay. So at this time, I request any deletions, corrections, or additions from the board members to the agenda at this time. In order to add an item to the agenda, the matter must have come to the attention of county subsequent to the posting of the agenda, and the matter requires action before the next regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors.
Madam Chair, there's been a great deal of news lately regarding the effects of sanctuary state and what was once known as SB 54, now called California Values Act. There has been a lot of fallout from this. We have the death of another officer in Newman, California, Corporal Singh. I'd like to have on the January 22nd a discussion and possible action for a letter to rescind California Values Act, aka SB 54 Sanctuary State, for discussion and possible action on the 122 agenda.
Anything else on the consent? So before we go forward on the vote, I would like to read two of the items. Item number 4 is to approve a step increase to the Director of Health and Human Services.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, are we talking about consent agenda now? Or are we talking about the...
Oh, I know. And I understand that, and we'll take that into consideration. Is that what you'd like to hear?
Now, are you calling for consent agenda now at this time?
I'm not calling for the vote yet. I'm trying to read something from there before we call for the vote.
Because I'd like to pull some items from consent.
Okay. What items
Okay.
would you like?
I'd like to pull items number 3, number 4. That's all. Numbers 3 and 4 for discussion.
Okay, is there any other?
Madam Chairman, I'd like to pull item 18 for discussion.
Item 18 is on regular items, not on the consent.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's on, oh, it is on, sorry about that.
So is that,
Go ahead.
you good with that then?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Supervisor, okay. So at this time, I have the consent agenda. Before we go to public comment, I'm going to read two of the items that are on there, and then we will go to public comment on the consent agenda. Item number 4, we'll talk about later because you pulled that, Supervisor. Item number 5, approve a step increase to step G on the appointed department head biweekly salary schedule for county council effective of the appointment date based on successful annual evaluations as directed by the Board of Supervisors. At this time, I will take any public comment on the consent agenda items only.
Madam Chairman, I'm sorry, I need to pull item 11. Have we pulled 11 at all?
11 also is not on the consent,
That is on, isn't that on consent?
under scheduled.
Could you,
Do you want to look at my, to make sure, I think maybe you got
I've
the
got
wrong
it.
one?
Oh, I'm sorry, I had the wrong thing here. Sorry about that. Go ahead. I'm okay.
Okay. I'll take public comment on the consent agenda at this time.
So, Linda Sutter County, Happy New Year. That's about it. I appreciate the fact that you're going to be giving your department heads a raise. They do deserve the raises. They work very hard for the county. But so do the people that work beneath them. And when I see that in a blink of an eye that you're ready to give raises to the department heads without a fight, but these people that work beneath them have to literally fight for their raises, I think that's an atrocity. So that's what I have to say in regards to that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Kyle?
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Henningsen?
Yes, I need to recuse myself on item number 8. I have a conflict of interest.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
And Chair Cowan?
Yes. Now I bypassed something, so I'm going to go back. I missed the introduction of new employees. Jay?
So it's my pleasure today to introduce Caitlin Goins as our new Emergency Services Manager with the County of Del Norte. Caitlin has been on the job for about 2 weeks now, and she is catching up very quickly with all of the projects and the grants and the connections that you have to make in order to fulfill the duties of the job, which are fairly immense. And Caitlin comes to us after working with the City of Brookings in finance, but also Caitlin has a degree in communications with a minor in business from Portland State, and she has 10 years of experience on the fire side of emergency services in a number of the different sections, including finance, public information, and I'm going to miss a couple of these so you can, when you give your speech, you can talk about it. But she's also managed a heliport and a lot of the services associated with aerial firefighting. So with that, I will let her give any update because she does like to talk to people, and that is one of the big advantages of this job. There's a lot of people to talk to.
And I'm a talker. Good morning, Board of Supervisors. I've had the honor and privilege of meeting several of you. So to those of you I haven't gotten to meet yet, hi, I'm Caitlin. I come from, I grew up in the Rogue Valley, worked for the Department of Forestry out of the Central Point and Grants Pass Southwest District offices for about 11 years. I have experience in logistics, planning, information, finance, dispatch, and I started out in aerial dispatching, which grew kind of into with air tankers and helicopters. Realized that the more qualifications you got, the more you could help your local communities, and my passion for public service kind of grew from there. It's been amazing. It's been a whirlwind these first couple of weeks. I've been attending our volunteer organizational meetings. I've been to, I think, 6 so far. It's amazing. You have a community here that is absolutely full of the most diligent, hardworking, passionate people, and it's an honor to be a part of that. It's also an honor to step behind some of the emergency service workers of the past and join forces with our current staff and our volunteers of today and work towards the future. My only hope is to build upon what already exists. I bring different insights, a different passion, and really looking forward to seeing and meeting with you all in the future and working with our great community. I'm very excited. So thank you very much for your time.
Great, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Caitlin.
Thank you so much.
Chair Cowan, if I could say something briefly. I know we've had a chance to talk before, and this week in particular, there's a lot of emphasis around our delegation from Japan visiting. And your job in particular will be extremely important to pieces of this, especially around tsunami awareness and preparedness. Just to give you a quick update, because we'll very much want you involved in the discussions, we've been able to work with the Assembly Speaker's Office and their Director of International Relations on some policy issues that are advancing, not so rapidly, but are now because of the involvement of Del Norte County and Crescent City on creating a policy platform around emergency preparedness at the state level with exchange with Japan. And we're going to be visiting Sacramento on Monday to have this discussion, both with the delegates, the Council General of Japan, and Del Norte County and Crescent City. It's a huge step, but we are at the forefront of this communication effort, and definitely want you to be involved with it going forward, because as you're aware, tsunami awareness and preparedness here in Del Norte, it's going to be a big issue of ours moving forward.
Definitely.
Thank you.
I'm happy to support you guys and assist in any way I can. Thank you.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to item 11, 10:05, the comment period. Members of the public may address the board on matters which are within the jurisdiction of the board. If you're addressing the board regarding a matter listed on the agenda, you may be asked to hold your comments until the board takes up that matter. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less.
Mike Thornton, True North Organizing Network, and also resident of Del Norte. First off, Chair Howard, thank you for your previous leadership as chair of the board, former Chair Howard, I should say, and Chair Cowan, we look forward to your leadership in your term as well. I'm here today because of the op-ed that's in the paper related to Mr. Gitlin's renewed efforts to ask this board to try to encourage rescinding of the California Values Act. This is the third, fourth, or fifth time that this has come up. Our local law enforcement has said in front of this board that this is not an issue in our community. There are so many other things that this board needs to put its attention to: housing, economy, emergency preparedness, homelessness, opportunity, all of the things that take up the majority of your time already. And what I would say is that this is just simply bad for our community. I'm not here to ask you to be nice to Latino people or to be kind to immigrants. What I'm saying to you is that fanning the flames of fear, fanning the flames of anger, of alienation, the politics of grievance, again and again and again, is bad for this community. The implication of Mr. Gitlin's op-ed today is that 2 of the supervisors voted to say no to this letter, 2 voted in favor of it, 1 abstained. I would encourage 3 of you to vote no on this and put this to bed and get busy with the things that this community really needs, and quit, whether intended or not intended, fanning the flames of anger and fear about things that are not affecting our community. I guess what I'm asking for is I'm asking for leadership on this issue, and to say once and for all, this needs to be put to bed so you can get busy doing the things that this community really needs you to do, not continuing to rehash this same issue over and over and over again. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Before we go on, Madam Chairman, may I respond? Since the gentleman spoke identifying me, I'd like to clarify some things.
I'll give you a minute.
We're talking about dangerous people here. I'm not going to get into this business of fanning the flames. In February of 2017, one time, we took a vote whether we would support or oppose, at the time, SB 54. There's no issue of embracing people who are coming into our community who have committed no problems. We're talking about dangerous people and the results of not having cooperation with all of our federal, state, local agencies. And we have a dead cop. And this cavalcade of assault and on our safety is ongoing. It's not a case of if, it's when it comes to Del Norte County. When some officer pulls over someone and then unbeknownst something happens. This is a huge national problem. California Values Act, whatever it's called, Cabo de Leon's law, is a bad law, and it's going to hurt people. It's going to hurt innocent people. We are not talking about people who abide by our laws. And I want to make that very clear, because we keep going back to that, Mike, and I'm sorry you keep doing that. We took one vote, it was 2-2, put it on the agenda, and let's clear it one way or another. How does this county feel about sending a letter to our state senator and our assemblyman and our new governor about rescinding a very, very dangerous law?
Donna Westfall, and first I want to wish each and every one of you a Happy New Year. The first time I saw Mike Thornton, he spoke about this issue. He was in complete agreement with sanctuary state, and I was on the opposite end. Since that time, we worked together on curing homelessness. I'm still on the opposite end. I think it's a constitutional issue, a law and order issue, and I absolutely want this brought up to a vote. I'm sincerely opposed to sanctuary state. Now, recently, someone sent me this on Facebook. It says, now leaving California. Leaving so soon? Was it something I taxed? All right. Can you all see that? And that's what I want to talk about today, is taxation and the squandering of my tax dollars. 70% goes to public education, 19% go to local governments. Oops. Before I get to that, I want to quickly say yesterday Bob Cochran was sworn in as Superior Court judge, and until last year I was very fond of Cochran. He represented me in an unlawful detainer action years ago and did a wonderful job. But last year I sat in the courtroom and watched as he, and now retired, Judge Follett pulled a sneaky. Because of that, I'm aware of a number of complaints going into commission on judicial performance to see about blocking Follett from returning to the bench as a retired judge, including one from the Local Taxpayers Association. Now, my last subject has to do with this wonderful book called The Edge, Arrival and Survival in Del Norte County. Nice piece by Roger Gitlin. Nice piece by Heidi Klein. Our public school system is churning out uneducated, poorly educated kids who do not have the tools in life to succeed. I know the BOS is not in charge of our public education system, but the school board does not have videotaping of their sessions. The last board meeting I attended, there were no parents in the room. Heidi Klein writes, my son is failing at Crescent Elk. I have asked the school repeatedly for tutors. I'm in a position that I can pay for it, don't get calls back, he's not taken seriously.
I hate to do this to you, but the 3 minutes are up. But thank you for your comments.
And I'd like to conclude by saying that 19% of my tax dollars go to this county. Please try to find common ground.
Thank you for your comments. We really appreciate them, but I've got to stay to 3 minutes. That's kind of going to be across the board with everybody, not just, but thank you. we have anybody else who would like to come up and speak? Come on up.
Hi, good morning. My name is Cynthia Borsell. I'm a resident of Del Norte County. I just want to bring up that the last time that the California Values Act was brought up, we had a representative from the ACLU specifically threaten to sue if we tried to rescind from the California Values Act. I don't think that's a smart move for us at all, because I don't see us having, you know, billions of dollars just hanging out that we can afford to get sued for. I don't think that's a smart move. This has got to stop. We need to vote. We need to just end it. This is just old news. It needs to be done with and over. Over and over again, it's being brought up and it's not being taken care of. We need to stop it. Rescinding, trying to rescind over and over and over again is institutional racism at its finest, trying to sneak in and divide our community. This has got to stop already. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Linda Fetter again. I don't want to talk about that stuff. What I'm kind of concerned about is with this government shutdown. On the news last night, they said that it could affect food stamps and whatnot else. We have 63 to 70% of our children here in Del Norte County that depend on free lunch programs. And if there is a crisis because of this democratic shutdown, I would hope that our farmers and, I mean, we are in a very nice community where we can all help each other. We've got our churches, we've got the schools, and we've got our farmers. So I hope that you guys have been talking about this amongst yourselves in case there is a crisis of some sort, because we don't know how quick around the corner it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
Members of the Board of Supervisors, thank you for the opportunity to address you today. My name is Jim Brown, and I live at 262 North Pebble Beach Drive with my wife, Kathy. Our request is that there be a review and update of any ordinances that may deal with parking, especially overnight on Pebble Beach Drive. More specifically, we are seeking a prohibition on overnight camping at the various pullouts along Pebble Beach Drive, possibly the posting of a time limit for parking, which would encourage more access to the area for our many visitors and residents of this area to see the beautiful scenery there, and possibly some signage that would indicate that these limits are in effect. This is prompted by recently a large pickup truck entering the small pullout area just north of Loft Street and Pebble Beach Drive, accompanied by a 25-foot trailer, which remained there for 2 or 3 nights when we lost track, and 24 hours a day. The truck was filled with debris, and the trailer, well, it was behind it. Nobody else could park or look out on the beautiful scenery there, and we had some great views the last week or two. This presents, in our judgment, a safety hazard, because when you get a large vehicle like that, especially staying overnight, it goes out of the pavement. Bikers, walkers, other cars have to go around it, and that's a danger. The street isn't that wide to begin with. Secondly, it's a potential health hazard, because our suspicion is that there may be some refuse being dropped over the side. And third, an aesthetic issue, because it prevents other people from viewing the scenery in that area. Pebble Beach is a treasure, the drive, a treasure for Crescent City, and in fact all of California. Many people come to visit the area every year and enjoy the drive along there, pulling up for the sunsets or sunrises or just watching the ocean. We're big subscribers to the broken window theory in our house, that if you take care of small problems at first, it presents big problems from happening later. And we called the sheriff's office about this. We were informed that there's nothing they could do about the overnight camping there. If that's the case, and I take them at their word, then we're asking for review of any ordinances that may govern this matter. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you'll have the opportunity to consider this in the future, and we're glad to serve as a resource if that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Hi, my name is Patricia Black, and I think you know what I'm going to say. So I hesitate to be down here again, but after reading the paper this morning, I felt it was really important. I felt compelled to say that I support those of you on this board who share my vision of a welcoming and inclusive community. I fully support the California Values Act. Of course, I'm horrified by the murder of officers, saying things like that should never happen. But if the murderer had been a white guy who lived in a house, would all white guys in houses have been targeted as potential criminals? I don't think so. And it's fully documented that undocumented people are less likely to commit crimes than citizens. For obvious reasons. They're trying to stay under the radar. So right now I should be, and I will soon be, at a joint ministry that the Methodists and Episcopalians have for showers and hot soup for people that are unhoused. That's another group of people that is really easy to other. And my hope is that 4 members of this board will vote not to change what they previously voted for or abstain from, which is to support the California Values Act. And I just want to add that it is not to protect criminals in any way. The people that it protects, the people that it lets feel safe, are the good, honest, hardworking people who might be pulled over for a broken taillight. And if they're asked for their immigration status, they might be deported. And those are the people that we want to say, we love you and you're part of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Black. Is there anyone else?
I'm Robert Dorigo, county resident. Excuse me. Very cold in here this morning.
Budget issue.
Is a budget issue. I just wanted to, I missed the cannabis work group the other day. I was thinking it was going to be Wednesday. I got into a loop on that and kind of burped. But I intended to resign the work group as I'd applied for licensing. And so it been brought to our attention by county council that, you know, we would be presenting a little bit of a conflict of interest and we should resign the group. And so I'm going to do that this morning formally. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to serve on the work group. And I think it needs to continue on in some form or another. You know, I've always said like maybe some sort of economic board, you know, the volunteers that maybe think about the kind of economy we want to see here. Maybe something hedging our bets against tourism a little bit, you know, and a job that maybe is where we focus on the idea of a year-round kind of gig, you know, that makes a 40-hour job, you know. I really think that would like just help a lot of the other issues that we have in the community, you know, to see more opportunities for people. But I'd love to, again, thank you for allowing me to serve on the board. It was humbling. It was quite an experience. I did want to address the Family Values Act just a little bit and just say that, you know, this for the community to know this is a Roger Gitlin issue, you know, and I understand people might have issues for, you know, about immigration. I've always thought it was the job issue people would bring up. Well, you know, there's, you know, and because I always say that with this community, we need more jobs, right? And we're going to have, and then they'll compete for workers, better opportunities we're striving for. But we don't do anything about self-checkout or anything like that, you know, and there's these robots that are literally took, I think, half the cashier's jobs, you know, at Walmart. And, but this is a, you know, for whatever anybody's beliefs on it, I guess I could probably understand anybody's angle, but it is a Supervisor Gitlin issue, you know, and if you could look back in history, you could do an online search of Supervisor Gitlin. I feel dirty just saying it. And you'll find that this is something that goes back years, you know, for Supervisor Gitlin. You know, a lot of racially provocative writings. And, you know, there was, I feel dirty just saying it, but I did a Roger Gitlin search. I don't think you're supposed to disavow it if you're going to hire them or anything. And maybe, and it might not be Roger Gitlin, there might be other Roger Gitlins out there, so to disavow that. But there's one case where somebody had been killed by, you know, an illegal immigrant on a road case years ago, and there's a Roger Gitlin commenting there. Could somebody, it wasn't illegal, they didn't know if he was illegal. And there's a Roger Gitlin commenting there, could somebody please tell me if he was an illegal immigrant? rgitlin or whatever at AOL.com, ragitlin at AOL.com. So I mean, this goes back, I think, predating his residency here in Del Norte County. So I'm just saying, you know, we don't need to jump on that wagon, but thank you.
On the board, I know that's a commitment for everybody who sits on that board of time and effort, and it takes away from family and businesses. So I, for one, really appreciate the time that you put into helping our county. Anybody else?
More speaking to this issue. I look around our, Eileen Cooper. I look around our community and I see the enrichment and the power that fuels our agricultural industry and the diversity that gives us cultural events that I prize from our Asian population who came here during a more generous time of responsibility to others and in times of hardship and war and opening our doors. And our community would be so much less without these diverse factions. And we owe this great richness to our immigrants. Our agricultural fields and farmers know this. I go down to Palo Road, I go and speak to farmers, and they want the Mexican-American help that they get, and they depend upon it. And it fuels our agricultural industry, and it fuels our diverse cultural events and enjoyment of this community. So, thank you.
Thank you.
People are ignoring the law and order aspect. We can't
Can you
have...
state your name for the record?
Oh, Paulette Enum.
Thanks, Paul.
Live in Jerry Hamilton's district. Anyway, the law and order aspect of this, you know, we can't have people just coming in illegally, stealing other people's social security cards, numbers, and people who come here legally, one thing they appreciate about the United States is our law and order. They come from countries where, you know, you give a policeman $20 and you go on your way. You know, we have a honest law and order system. And, you know, you just can't equate legal immigration with the illegal immigration. And as far as farmers, I love the agriculture industry, but they need to figure out how to honestly employ people. And I think maybe we're shortchanging them, and they are. You know, we can't just, like I said, throw away our system of law and order. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. I'm going to go on to our 10:15 schedule. Oh, I'm going to close public comment at this time. Thank you. We're going to conduct a public hearing to approve and authorize a submission of the 2018-2019 Community Development Block Grant application, and 2, approve and adopt a resolution of the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors approving an application for funding and the execution of a grant agreement and any amendment thereto from the state CDBG program as requested by County Administration Officer. Ms. Self. Good morning.
I'm a little under the weather this morning. Thank you. I'm going to just jump right in. After proper public notification, a public hearing was held on November 27th to solicit input into the project design phase of the 2018-19 CDBG application, which is a requirement in the public participation process, which is the reason I'm here for a public hearing, to get your authorization to proceed with an application. On December 11th, a Grants Goal Committee meeting was held to discuss the potential application that we are discussing today. Based on the design phase hearing and the recommendations of the Grants Goal Committee, staff has developed an application that identifies the programs and projects as recommended. Therefore, I am here this morning to request that the board approve and authorize a county application as follows. Public services in the amount of $500,000, one of those being for the court-appointed special advocates, or CASA, in the amount of $250,000, and part of that being for the Del Norte Senior Center for the senior nutrition program, which they're asking for an additional $250,000, making up that $500,000. Also, as part of our application, we'll be applying for a planning and technical assistance grant, which will allow us to complete a feasibility study to address ADA compliance with our manual arts and our recreation gym. And also, the last would be our public facility project, which is the Smith River Community Hall Accessibility Project, and that's in the amount of $200,000. So our total application will be at $800,000. General administration off the top of that will be the $55,814. Also, the county will have to utilize $5,000 from an administrative professional services budget as a county's cash match, which is required for the planning and technical assistance activity within this application. I apologize. If the grant application is approved as submitted, the projects will be completed and funded and expended within a 2-year period beginning on the date of the standard agreement is approved and the county is able to clear conditions with the state. Costs relating to the grant activities will be reimbursed by the Department of Housing and Community Development. So basically here I'm here to obtain approval, and my brain just is foggy and I apologize, as for the application as proposed. The other alternative would be to not accept the application and not file an application this year, making us available for funding next year, or modify the application as submitted. Is there any questions?
Any questions from the board?
Are there any questions?
No, I'd like to make that motion. Tony, you've done a great job on this. I appreciate your effort on it. Motion to approve and adopt this resolution approving an application for funding of the identified partners of this recipient of this grant in the execution of the grant agreement and the amendment thereof to the state CDBG program as requested by the CAO.
Madam Chairman, as a member of this group, I'm really privileged to have the opportunity to be able to second this motion.
Great. I'll take public comment at this time.
Good morning. My name is Robert Dytuski, Smith River. I'm representing the Smith River CSD as chair of the board. We reapplied for this grant since we didn't get the cut last time for an amount of $260,000 for the upgrades to the Smith River Community Hall. And I'm requesting a response from Tony or the board why it's $200,000 instead of $260,000.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. No, she said she would meet with him and discuss it. I'm okay with that. Any other public comment? Anything else from the board? We have a motion and a second on the floor. Kylie?
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Chair Cowan?
Yes. Okay, our next item is to conduct a public hearing to provide the public an opportunity. Was that to hear and provide comment on the results and activities involved in community development block grants 15-CDBG 1059, and 2, to accept the final results of this grant as meeting the requirements of the grant and various agreements as requested by the CAO.
Okay. CDBG grant requires public hearings at several stages, which includes the design phase, the application phase, as well as the closeout. Today I'm here to address the closeout of our 2015 grant. In 2015, the county was awarded a CDBG grant funds in the amount of $1,831,000. Said grant award was made up of multiple activities as follows. We were awarded public services activities for CASA, as well as the senior nutrition program. We were able to obtain approval from HCD to draw down grant funds for our public services and start utilizing the funding for our public services in May of 2016 without having to wait to clear special conditions. And this was a special one-time thing that CDBG allowed so our public services could keep going. Between May 2016 and September 2018, the following accomplishments were reported. CASA expended $232,558 for their children's advocacy program, assisting over 70 youth in their programs, which is almost double than what we've been able to help them in the past. The Del Norte Senior Center also expended $232,558 for their senior nutrition program, assisting over 655 seniors in our community with the Meals on Wheels program. Due to the delay in clearing of the special conditions that were placed on the county CDBG grant as a result of the closeout rescission of the county's 08 SDBG 4642 grant, we were unable to obtain approval to draw down the remaining grant funds for the public infrastructure and public facility projects until January of 2018. Once the conditions were finally cleared, we had to reclose out our 2008 grant. We were finally allowed to begin working on the public infrastructure and the public facilities projects. Because of these delays, as a result of that rescission of the closeout of our 2008 grant, the expenditure deadline, which is an automatic built-in to our standard agreement, was September 30th, 2018. When we went for an application to extend our expenditure deadline, it was denied. And we were advised that HCD is no longer providing extensions to the expenditure deadlines like they had in the past due to HCD's poor expenditure ratings with housing and urban development. Apparently they're like the lowest, they have a hard time spending their grant funds, which I find hard to believe, but they do. So let me explain to you how this worked as far as final closeout. Since construction was already underway for the Best Maxwell project, the CDBG portion of it, we thankfully had good weather, and we were able to have the Best Maxwell project and funding spent by the expenditure deadline of September 30th. And I don't know if any of you have had driven out there on El Dorado. Fabulous job. Fabulous job done by CDD and the contractor, Tidewater. This project constructed bicycle and pedestrian improvements, ultimately improving access to surrounding schools. The improvements included reconstructing of curb ramps, eliminating discontinuous or missing sidewalks, overlay the existing roadway, and eliminated a 1-inch lip between the existing pavement and the surface of the gutter pan, which previously did not allow bicycle lanes to be delineated. And then they were able to delineate bicycle lanes and installing all brand new roadway along El Dorado. So the project, like I said, was located along El Dorado, and we were able to complete construction, spend all of our grant funds in the amount of $1,025,799, and we've served over 2,100 people as a result of this project on the daily trips and getting to their children to school and whatnot. Very successful project. Turned out phenomenal. Now the bad news. The public facility project, or the Smith River Community Hall. The funding was to be used to provide accessibility upgrades to the Smith River Community Hall. There was a study that was funded with CDBG funds back in 2011 that paid for said feasibility study. As a result of the delay in the placement of the special conditions on our 2015 grant and the amount of work that was necessary for this project to be completed, we would not have been able to have final engineered drawings, a contractor hired, and the construction completed due to the time it would have taken based on the procurement requirements that are built into the CDBG grants as well, and the funding spent in time to meet the state assigned expenditure deadline of September 30th. We did not make this decision to not move ahead lightly. The county made several attempts, as I mentioned before, to obtain an extension of the expenditure deadline based on our inability to begin the project as a direct result of the placement of those special conditions by HCD on our 2015 grant, but were unsuccessful, unfortunately. Since we would not have been able to complete the entire project by September 30th deadline, any work that would have been completed would not have met the national objective. Therefore, any monies that were expended would not have been reimbursed, and the county would have been liable for those funding, excuse me. The entire grant award in the amount of $162,558 has to be disencumbered back to the state. So the amount expended on the Smith River project is zero. The entire award of $162,558 is being disencumbered back to the state, and no number of persons served in this, unfortunately, is zero. The county also received, as a part of this grant, general administration, and as a result of the denial of the extension, a large portion of this funding also has to be returned to the state, and that will be disencumbered. So that's pretty much it, unfortunately. Are there any questions?
Yes, Tony, what's the action that you need today?
I need for you to approve the activities and final results of the 2015 CDBG grant.
And I'll make that motion to accept the final results through this grant. Is that what it is? Or I make that motion to accept the final results through this grant as meeting the requirements of the grant and various agreements as requested.
Do we have a second?
Madam Chairman, I'll second that.
Can I have a second? I'm going to open it up for public comment. No public comment. Bring it back to the board. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Kylie?
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Chair Cowan?
Yes. Thank you, Tony. So item number 14 is Department of Health and Human Services update. Heather? Ms. Snow?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have just a really quick update based on the last meeting. So at the last meeting, I had brought the AOD lease termination and was given direction from the board to have further conversations with the landlord and with council. And I just wanted to give a quick update that that's been happening. I've been engaging in conversations and hope to bring something back in the future. Can't give any details to that yet because it's still being negotiated, but it would probably be 2 meetings from now. And at that time also, I hope to bring some more documents to address some of the questions that came up. Some of the things that were brought up were the existence of an industry standard, so I want to give some supporting information if that exists and if our agreement is consistent with that. Supervisor Berkowitz and Gitlin had questions, so I want to show if I'm able to get the information from the landlord, the cost of the build out. I had mentioned that was built into the life of the lease, and that was an expense that he took on for us to do the project. So I want to share that as well. And then I think it'd be helpful if I can just show you a side-by-side of the cost savings that we'll achieve if you approve the early termination versus the higher cost of seeing the lease through. So
thank you.
Just a quick update.
Any questions from the board?
So Heather, we spoke, and I requested, I'd like to take a look at the facility. It's currently being utilized right now as we speak. So how many people working there?
Well, we're making the transition presently, and there won't be staff working there in the next week, and we'll be fully moved out by the end of the month.
So if I were to say it's during this course of this next few days, you could arrange for me to go into the building and see what the build-outs are all about, and perhaps quantify that in terms of how much money was there and what it meant as a build-out. And maybe it's an improvement that's universal. There's a office area, reception area. I mean, these are areas that can be used by a lot of different people. My concern is the so-called industry standard, which I don't believe there is one. And secondly, the amount of payment from the state to Plaza Partners, the landlord, in the amount of almost $163,000 for the balance of this 10-year lease, which I think has 8 years to go. There's no out clause in the lease agreement to say what the buyout is, which is I'm thinking is an omission of somebody's part. There's no penalty proviso. It's all left up to the Board of Supervisors to approve this rather large payout, and I have some problems with spending state money in this regard. So can we take a look at it this week, not on the weekend, but during the week? Is that a possibility?
It would interrupt services to permit a visit during the week, so I would prefer to do it either next week when we're not operating out of the building anymore, or during the weekend.
All right, so let's wait until next week during the week, if that's possible. Okay. I'll contact you.
We'll be in touch, and the floor plan is available, and the original lease, which was signed and approved by the board in 2013, has a section detailing what that build-out consists of that the landlord took on to meet the specifications for AOD, which really is some requirements of the state and some special protections of our IT equipment and security.
But there was no clause in the lease indicating an abrogation of the lease. What happens if you break the lease? There's nothing in there.
There have been two separate leases. So the first lease was 2013 to 2016, and currently we're under the subsequent lease.
Which is 2016 to 2026, which is 10 years, and which is 2 years into the lease.
Correct.
So this is a question of about 8 years worth of unused rental. Now my question still lingers. What happens with Mr. Faring when he re-rents this building 3, 4, 5, 6 months from now and gets his $3,000 a month rent, and the state has coughed up $163,000? I'm having some problems with that.
So as I mentioned, I'm going to be bringing something back in the future. I'm not prepared to answer any further details at this moment until we can see what could be negotiated to be reconsidered. So I hope that can be addressed in the future, and your concerns are noted.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the audience regarding Ms. Snow's presentation?
I missed the last meeting, so I don't know if she mentioned why they were moving out of the building to begin with, but
to save money.
To save money? Okay, well, you know, maybe you guys should reconsider her ability to get a raise this year, because she's spending $163,000 to save money. That should save on our ability to pay her a larger wage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Eileen Cooper. At the previous meeting, Heather Snow mentioned that she had questioned other departments as to finding an alternate use. She really didn't go into any details about the thoroughness of that search in this community. I don't know if, I have no idea whether we have the ability to sublease it to another entity in the community, and how thorough the search was. I would think, well, if we're going to save, what is it, $60,000 a year in the future, but we could do even better than that. We could find a use for this building in this community, and that would be even better. So I suggest we do a more thorough search as to uses and maybe other departments and the willingness of the landlord for subleasing for another purpose. So I think we can do even better. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any more questions from the board? There's no action to be taken on this item at this time. So we're going to go on to item number 15, presentation on outdoor commercial cannabis cultivation in Timberland, possible general plan amendment, and CEQA issues. Joel?
Good morning, board.
Good morning. Oh, we got slides.
Do we have slides?
No heaters.
Okay, they're coming.
I do.
So I covered the basic details of this ordinance last month. The board had some questions. I took those back to the working group yesterday, and I have some responses. But bigger than that, I think the cannabis ordinance process is at a pretty significant crossroads here in the county. Throughout this process, and especially at the beginning, I discussed at length Timberland as kind of the logical place for cannabis, both because it's out of sight and because that's where a lot of the illegal or unregulated decriminalized growing was already happening. We saved this for last because we knew that this was the most complicated place to grow. And now I want to bring some of those complications forward because I think that they're going to require, at the very minimum, some CEQA review that might be costly and possibly a general plan amendment. And so I don't want to just move forward with the bare facts and then come back in 6 months and say we need money for scientists. And so I want to get into some of the issues going on with that. So this is just the basic details from last time. We're talking about 2,500 square feet on unpaved roads and 1,000 square feet on paved roads. Artificial lighting no more than 6 watts. The working group would like to revise that down to 2 watts and add that the light should be facing downward and possibly blackout curtains and tarps. That is for light pollution, and I think, as we'll discuss later, when we get into the CEQA issues about cumulative effects of light pollution, those might need to be stronger. The 1-to-1 ratio of vegetative to cultivation space we discussed last time, apparently the process is you need flowering plants and basically an equal amount of non-flowering plant space. So a 10,000 square foot operation is really 20,000 square feet, and 2,500 square feet is really 5,000 square feet. No odor control. Kind of the point is to have it outdoors and far away instead of odor filtration. And the light pollution, those amendments I just spoke of. The only zone that this would be allowed in is the agriculture forestry AF zone. There's not much of this right now, but we would require, or we would actually do ourselves, rezones from PO or TPZ to AF. And that will require some general plan reworking for some reasons that we'll get into. The definition of outdoor is that it's with no artificial lighting or artificial lighting less than 6 watts per square foot. That's actually the state definition for one of the mixed lighting uses. So we're kind of operating on a little bit of a hybrid system here. Instead of allowing a mixed light, an indoor and an outdoor, we just kind of split it. And one of the reasons for that is because that's the way we wrote our tax ordinance. We have indoor and outdoor. And rather than go back to the voters, we just let people use some lighting for outdoor. Last time we talked about no surface water diversions. Yesterday in the working group we talked about allowing surface water diversions in accordance with the state water board's cannabis policy. One of the reasons is as we look at this ordinance we see that we have made it really difficult for anybody to operate financially successfully. We don't have a lot of groundwater resources in these areas. and we don't want a lot of people trucking water in. So we have rainwater catchment, basically, or these water diversions. The state has a new cannabis policy. Supervisor Howard, you're looking at me quizzically.
He made a statement that just has me absolutely puzzled. We don't have a lot of groundwater resources. We just got designated as a very, very low priority by the State Groundwater Management Act through Department of Water Resources. So it just conflicts a little, and that's my puzzle.
Okay. The areas we're talking about, these timberland regions, are, I believe, outside the basin, right, where they're talking about for the SGMA purposes. In the 2003 EIR for the general plan amendment, it specifically mentioned that the major significant possible impact in these timberland regions of development was a lack of groundwater resources. And so it recommended as a mitigation policy that development be restricted to places that had public water systems. And so that's kind of where we're going. We're looking at places that would, you know, don't have a lot of wells currently, but if they did have wells, we'd have to be doing some significant cumulative impact analysis to what would a lot of cultivation with agriculture do in these specific dry areas. Of course, you know, that could be wrong information, and as I'll talk about in a minute, we need more information. But water quality has requirements for how much water you can take out of streams and a period you can take it out of the streams. And that would be basically just to store water during the wet season to use during the dry season. So it is surface water diversions. It is something we talked about not doing. It is specifically not allowed in the indoor cultivation ordinance that the board passed. So that is a change from the working group. We also didn't have any kind of electrical requirements, and the working group has decided we still don't need any. Either you're on the grid with the larger, or the expense of the lights and the things, the economic reasons will prevent kind of wasteful energy use off the grid. It would be a combination of solar and generators probably. In the state regs, beginning in 2023, each applicant has to ensure that electrical power usage meets average electricity greenhouse emissions intensities required by local utility provider. I don't exactly know what that means. I have been trying to figure it out, and I'm hoping Pacific Power can actually explain it to me. But that would apply to what we're proposing, which are these kind of tier 2 mixed light uses. The setbacks are 1,000 feet from a residential zone, 200 feet from a highway, 50 feet from all property lines, and 1,000 feet from county, state, and national parks. And it does not include parkland, Forest Service land. And we did talk about that a little last time. Nurseries is a much larger operation and much less regulated. These are, by and large, not mature flowering plants. And if they are, no part of that is allowed to be sold except the seeds. So the working group's proposal is that because they are less likely to have odor, and because they don't have the same black market value, because they're not mature, ready to use, to allow them to be much larger. And so be about the same size uses in ag forestry, no limit on the size in manufacturing, and in agriculture and agricultural industrial, 20,000 square feet, which is basically the same size footprint as the 10,000 square foot outdoor cultivation with the vegetative space. Because there's less likely to be offensive odor, I think we can mitigate this by requiring kind of classic nuisance issues like having people choose lower odor strains and varieties and using filtration systems. And if they're going to be cultivated anywhere near hemp, which is a thing that could be moving in soon, pollen filtration systems so we don't have cross-pollination problems to kind of protect hemp as an industry. These would be in a structure, and in a coastal zone they'd have the same requirements of an existing structure, and the same visual and odor mitigation plans as the other cultivation. And so then we kind of get into our practical issues, and that is that we have to be fully consistent between our general plan, which is kind of the constitution for our land use, and individual zoning requirements. And if they're not consistent, we have a legal duty to get them consistent in a reasonable amount of time. Our timberland in our general plan is pretty restrictive. It's for the growing and harvesting of timber on fairly large parcels. And the accessory uses are things that are kind of natural coincidences of timber, wood chippers, mills, labor camps, watershed and wildlife habitat management, because this is kind of a crop management type situation. And then it goes into some things that are a little less clear why they're in there, like mineral extraction, which is an environmentally heavy use, and agricultural grazing, where conversion is not required. I think if you kind of read our general plan broadly, there's some areas where it talks about timberland having ag lands on it because of the way parcel lines are drawn. And I think that's where the agricultural grazing comes from. We're talking about areas where we're actually, it's not timberland, but it's zoned or has a land use designation timberland. The mineral extraction, I'm still a little unclear about. Then with a permit, if there's no detraction from the principal use, camping, transmission facilities like power lines, single-family dwellings, and visitor lodge. If you kind of look at the vision for timberland, I think it's a little unclear. In a lot of other jurisdictions, timberland will say growing and harvesting of timberland and then just stop. So we included a little bit more detail, maybe to our detriment a little bit. Then our consistency chart really has only these zones that are consistent with the timberland land use designation. A lot of our privately held timberland is in PO, and that is not a consistent zone. The general plan directed us, when it was implemented, to within 2 years change our AF zoning uses to be consistent with the general plan, and then zone our PO into AF. And so that's really something that we should do now if we want to bring cannabis into the timberlands. It's an opportunity to kind of amend and update our AF, add cannabis to it, and probably clean up the general plan definition of timberland so that it's clear that that's a consistent use. And so this is the current principally permitted uses in AF, and this is what we would delete from them. And so it would basically be logging and forestry uses, just like that timberland definition. And then we move these things into the use permit category, so we have discretionary review of them and add cannabis in there. One of the issues, though, is that the ag forestry concept is that agriculture and forestry can coexist in these parcels. We're looking at deleting dairies and some more intense uses that I think are pretty clearly not consistent with timberland, which I think is what that implementation policy is getting at. But then agriculture itself, including nurseries and greenhouses, and we're proposing commercial cannabis cultivation, they might kind of skirt the line, kind of like a low impact agriculture. But that would be where we start analyzing things like groundwater resources and paved roads and things for the suitability of agriculture in timberland, which, while it's in AF, it wasn't in our general plan. So we kind of, it's a new use being introduced. And then we keep these things like commercial excavation for rock and gravel and oil and gas drilling, not because it's entirely clear that that's something people want to do or why it was in there, but it is actually currently consistent with the general plan, because the general plan did say resource extraction and mining. We have been using an exemption for these ordinances for cannabis because the state gave us a specific exemption for cannabis-related regulations that require a use permit that will undergo CEQA. But these rezones and the general plan amendment would be outside of that exemption. So we would have to do CEQA review on the clarifying of the general plan and the rezoning of AF. which means we have to do an initial study where we look at the potential impacts, whether there'll be none, or whether we can mitigate them, and if not, do a full EIR. And so, these are our options. We don't have a lot of money to go and acquire studies and experts to do these initial studies and decide where we are, but we pretty much need to. And so as staff, we can go into the initial study phase and see how far we can get with what we can find and see how comfortable and confident we are. But really, when we're talking about introducing a new legal use into timberland, I'm a little dodgy on the idea of kind of not acquiring some serious resources. We first have to go find thresholds of significance. If you say an impact is significant, what is significant? And we do have actually a lot of discretion to decide for ourselves what an appropriate threshold is, but we'd have to go out and find some. And one of the things that we would look at is the environmental change or the physical change of the environment leading to an economic or social change? And I think that's particularly important because throughout this process, the primary apprehension that I've heard expressed is a cultural and social change in the county towards what you see in southern Humboldt southern Oregon or in all of Humboldt, where we're kind of changing the nature of the economy of timberlands into kind of growing culture. And that would have to be, assessed for its impacts. And then you have your cumulative impacts. Even though every use permit we're going to go CEQA, if we're going to do a rezone that allows future projects, even if those future projects want to go CEQA, we have to look at the cumulative effects of all of those future projects, or all the probable ones. Now, it's difficult to know how many future probable cannabis operations there would be. And that would require some studying. But if you're looking at classically cumulative impact type things like light, odor, and water, where one operation isn't using a detrimental amount of water, but maybe 50 are, those are things that need to be assessed and reviewed for impacts. There you go. And then the social and economic changes are cumulative too. One operation in the forest isn't going to change the neighborhood, but we're talking about low density, low developed places. Because we have a historic issue with lots zoned a lot smaller than those 20 and 40 acres that we kind of plan for, you could actually fit a lot of cannabis cultivation into some of these spots, really changing dramatically the culture of the area. So, big picture, what I'm kind of trying to express is that in addition to trying to shoehorn cannabis into timberland, we're really looking at a little bit more of a philosophical conversation about what is an appropriate thing to do with our timberland. A lot of these parcels, according to people who know things, according to the working group, are places where probably these parcels aren't economically productive for timberland anymore. And so as a matter of planning, what does Del Norte County want to do with areas that aren't economically productive for timberland? And they're still important habitat, and so they still have some environmental protections, but is this area that the county wants to open up to more agricultural uses or more tourist uses like the visitor lodge, and that could incorporate cannabis. And so we're looking at a broader issue than just cannabis. We're looking at what is timberland in kind of a post-timber economy. And that's a long-term planning issue. And I don't know if we're very confident that the number of growers and the tax revenue is going to pay for this process. And so I'm not specifically looking for direction at the moment, but I want to kind of plant the idea in people's minds that the general plan is basically a 20-year document, and it's getting up there. We're going to be looking at more than just cannabis, but what are we doing with timberlands in the future? And that is not going to be cheap immediately now with cannabis or in the future. And so there's a possibility in a fee schedule coming forward soon of a planning fee that goes on building permits. I would encourage the board to seriously consider that as a source of revenue to be dedicated towards these types of issues in the future. Also, we'll move forward with these things and get as far as we can on initial studies. But don't be too surprised if we're back here at some point or in the budget process asking for studies and consultants and RFPs. So if there's any questions, any comments, any direction, any concerns, love to hear it.
Any questions from the board? Supervisor Howard?
Joel, thanks for that bomb.
Better now than later, right?
Yeah, it seems like we've kind of moved through a process over this last year, trying to get to a place where at least we initially thought TPZ would be the home, land zoned as timber production zone on these forested lands would be the home for this. We've taken steps to get there, and all of a sudden now the board's hearing that maybe our general plan and our zoning conflict to the point where we've got to open up a hell of a can of worms just to get what's currently already existing out there in the landscape legal. That's a huge ball of string we have to unravel at this point in time. Bothers the hell out of me. I'm just now hearing about this.
Well, I think, the working group has been really, really helpful because a year ago we didn't know that much about how cannabis gets cultivated and what kind of impacts. Regulations have changed and developed, the industry's developed. We have a clearer picture of what goes on out there. And yeah, we have some kind of general plan and zoning issues that kind of came forward as we're looking at this in the working group. And they make things a lot more complicated than we initially thought. So I guess I'm sorry it has come forward like this. On the other hand, I think the working group has worked, and this is kind of the proof.
Better now than later.
Well,
Yeah.
here's some of my initial thoughts. We're to the point now, we've come down the road quite a ways. The working group has done a lot of due diligence, a lot of volunteer effort to get some guidance to the county. I think there's still belief that we want to move forward with something within TPZ's own lands. Having been in the timber industry for the majority of my career up here, I know it takes 50 to 60 years to realize any type of revenue, taxation type revenue from those type of lands. If there's a way to shortcut that through whatever kind of boutique industry develops from us as a board taking a look at changes to our general plan, I think we need to venture down that path. Maybe the initial study that we begin to pursue through the CEQA process can be done through Community Development Department, and or maybe it can't. But we've got a pretty good staff over there that's got quite a good understanding of the California Environmental Quality Act, and I don't see why we couldn't pursue some of these things that take a look exactly at what you had mentioned. I'm, for a part of the state, and this is getting back to our discussion around water, for a part of the state that realizes so much rainfall, I don't see why there's any reason that we can pursue some of those guidelines that are offered currently by the State Water Board that would allow for those catchment type basins during the wet seasons of the year. There's no reason we have to be different in those regards. The impact to wildlife, having been around it most of my life up here, would be fairly minimal during those periods of the year. But yeah, I definitely want to discuss this further with my fellow board members and staff and see what we can do to help get us to a point that would allow whatever industries that currently exist to become legal.
Supervisor Hemmingson.
Madam Chair, yes, thank you. Yeah, I had a couple of things, and I don't think this is something where we need to reinvent the wheel. If Humboldt County, I believe, did an EIR, is that correct?
They did a pretty extensive one.
And they've pretty much done this. I mean, they must have grows in TPZ, so they must have done some sort of changes. So it's not like we got to reinvent something. Seems like most of the groundwork would be done for that similar areas, and similar impacts. So I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel there, do we?
I don't know. And that would be the kind of thing that gets analyzed in the initial study by the planners. But when I brought up the idea of kind of tearing off the Humboldt EIR, they didn't seem very excited. It didn't seem like that. It seemed like
Who?
Heidi. Throw Heidi under the bus. Okay. And I don't know if Heidi has comments on exactly what her staff can handle, but I'm not saying, like, as Supervisor Howard mentioned, we are planning on moving forward with this and going to the initial study. I just didn't want to kind of oversell and underdeliver and come back later and say, well, we did it and now we're stuck.
Yeah, and I think now, if we're talking about an entire general plan amendment, we're not talking about doing this in a couple of weeks. We're talking about months. Years,
well,
possibly down the road. So
we would hope.
Doesn't that have to go to the coast? Some of that go to the coastal commission or not?
This would all be outside.
This is all outside the coastal. Okay.
We would want to do it on a timeline that would allow an industry to start in the next growing season in 2020. Okay. So like by the end of the summer. And I think that's doable. And there's kind of this balance where you kind of craft an ordinance to be kind of minimal impacts. And then, when you go through these processes, you circulate it to every government agency, and you circulate it to the tribes, and you get comments. And, if we can get those ordinances in place that a lot of people are happy with it, it can kind of bring down the level of scrutiny and bring down some of the contentiousness, and so we can keep amending the ordinance to get it into a place, hopefully.
The other thing is, earlier in the presentation, you talked about odor and light pollution, and that there would be no controls on that for the outdoor cultivation. So is there any way to control that if odor is a problem or if light is a problem, or is this something that?
Well, with light, that is something the working group has amended some of those things to try to reduce that. But in general, kind of the way the ordinance is that it's kind of your classic nuisance issue where if you're bothering your neighbor, you get complaints. The idea with these kind of remoter parcels was that you'd be less likely to get complaints and therefore it's the more appropriate place for outdoor cultivation. And part of that cumulative impacts analysis is kind of, how do you keep it from filling up a valley, right, where you're driving down the 199 and you can't see anything, right?
That's what I was just going to.
And so if one particular permittee has 2,500 square foot of flowering cannabis, and you're like, oh, that's not going to smell that bad. You're on 5, 10, 20 acres, but there's 30 people like that in your area. Yeah, those are the kinds of cumulative impacts that we're talking about.
Well, and I was going to say that as you're driving down, it could be down 101 or down across 199 or whatever, and all of a sudden you hit this spot that's pretty pungent, and that's not too bad because you move through it and it clears up and that's fine. But if I had to live next to that, I would say that's going to be an issue.
Yes, and and if you live next to it and you're smelling it all the time, then you have your classic nuisance where you're interfering with somebody's quiet enjoyment, and we could do that through code enforcement. Also, the use permit process where you show up and say, yeah, that might be fine somewhere else, but it's, across the highway from me. And I think the Planning Commission is pretty conservative on the issue. So I'm not too worried that the ordinance kind of as structured would pose a lot of neighbor problems. I'm more worried about CEQA problems.
Supervisor Berkowitz, any questions? Supervisor Gitlin, do you have any questions? I'm going to open it up to the audience. Does anybody have any public comment?
Hi, Linda Sutter. I watch a lot of documentaries, and not because I always want to, but because I only get 3 channels. And one came up recently was on Humboldt County, the Emerald Triangle. And they showed the environmental impact of what occurs to animals from some of these groves that use certain pesticides. The rodents eat them, and then the owls come by and grab the rodents, or maybe even a bald eagle. And, you know, and so, and I would strongly urge you guys to try to find that on YouTube, the Emerald Triangle, Humboldt County, and negative impacts of environments from cannabis. I don't say this because I'm against industry, because I'm not against industry, and I think cannabis is a good industry. Excuse me. And as far as the light pollution, I haven't seen what the effect of that is. But if you have animals that are nocturnal animals, and then they're invaded with light, that's gotta do something. I just don't know what. I'm not an environmentalist, but it's something to consider. And so, with that said, see y'all later.
Thanks.
Eileen Cooper. Definitely, a thorough CEQA review is called for if we're entering into forest cultivation. This industry has a horrendous history. We have precious drinking water in this community. The headwaters are in every creek in our forests. And just as we didn't want to put up with mining, we should not be willing to put up with any kind of stream pollution and threaten the clean water we have. That alone requires CEQA review for this kind of new use. Also, forest is of great value. You're converting, and the animals and wildlife that have grown around our community live in forest environment, and this is one of the most biodiverse areas in the world. It rivals the temperate rainforest that we have here, where they're going to locate, rivals anywhere for diversity. And we have many endemic and rare species that are very water dependent, and definitely this is a huge CEQA issue. It's not the light and sound that's going to bother Mr. Henningsen that bothers me. It's all these effects on our wildlife. It's taking up habitat that animals have evolved with forest. And we don't have the protections, stream protections in place in our general plan, period. I don't like what's happening with agriculture right now. I don't like that we don't have real stream buffers. We have just recommendations. The California Fish and Wildlife continually has to come out and say, no, you're too close to the streams. We really want 100-foot buffers with no impact. We really want on our bigger streams, we want the 50-foot buffers with no impact on our small streams. And yet, when developers push and shove, it goes by the wayside. And I'd like to see us get some firm county-wide buffers like you have in coastal, where you know you're going to have the 100-foot buffers. There's so many issues here. Thank you.
Morning, Jesse Davis. I think Eileen brings up a lot of the reasons why management in the timberlands is important, getting things consistent with the general plan is important and worthwhile, regardless of whether or not cannabis is part of it in the future. And then I'll just keep repeating it. Environmental damage comes from illegal operations, not from legal operations. And so I've sort of thought we've been moving in sort of the wrong direction with outdoor cultivation for a little while. I think Joel's been more optimistic than I have for a while, and I went along with it because Joel knows more than I do about how things work. But I kind of thought from the very beginning that if there's going to be outdoor cultivation in timberland, then it has to be of the absolute smallest scale and the smallest volume, the smallest density, lowest density possible, almost to the point to where it's not worth it to do it for anybody, and to the point where it's not worth it for the county to spend the money to develop the regulation. So it's an interesting catch-22 that I wanted from the beginning, that other voices on the working group pointed out, hey, your little dream's not going to work for everyone else. You can't put your little dream onto other entrepreneurs. It's not going to work. If there's not enough participation in the county to make the program work, you can't have a program. Other activists in their counties have said the same thing from the very beginning. And so that kind of left me wondering, you know, how to move forward, you know, a year ago with that, because I don't want to see what it takes to make it worth doing, honestly, and how to balance that, you know. And I kind of just had faith that maybe we'd find that balance somewhere in the process, and I don't know that we have. But I'd like to move a little bit back toward my first, you know, intuitive idea about what's possible here, and you know, not agree so much with the other voices on the working group about the scale that things need to be. And I think that just focusing on production, cannabis production, is never going to work here. I don't think it's going to work in Humboldt. It's not going to work in any mountain region really long term. It's going to have to be something that involves tourism and education, recreation, environmentalism, guests at your lodge. It has something to do with cannabis. You know, I mean, there's so many ways to be creative with it that don't have to do with just production of units. You know, I mean, an operation that's so small that the environmental impacts of the cannabis, the water use of the cannabis, is incidental to what's going on there. If you had a guest retreat, say, that's cannabis oriented, you know, the impacts are...
Thanks, Jesse. We appreciate your input.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon. Councilmember Ryan Ray with the Yurok Tribe. I'm here today on behalf of the Tribal Council to request a moratorium on the ordinance until there is an opportunity to have a government-to-government meeting between the Delaware County Supervisors and the Yurok Tribal Council. The tribe has had an opportunity to review the moratorium language and supports it, the implementation of the moratorium as drafted by the Delaware County Council. The tribe has been, I hear the Humboldt County come up a couple of times. The tribe has been involved with the Humboldt County when they have went through this process. We have seen the impacts to the cultural and natural resources. So at this time, I think it would behoove the councils to get together and to really talk this out and to identify these cultural sites and these waterways that we have in the past seen impacted by cultivation of cannabis. I don't know, if, Ellie, if you got anything you want to add?
Well, coming up on item 21 is to talk about the interim ordinance and establishing a temporary moratorium.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Do you want to wait till that item and talk about it at that point? Great, thanks.
I just wanted to let you know that I believe that the report that was written for the EIR for Humboldt County did not consider all future impacts. It wasn't comprehensive, and it no longer meets the standard that the state is looking for. So I think that's some of the problem just on relying on that.
Good to know, thank you.
Hi, Robert Dorigo again. You know, I just wanted to say, you know, I support his endeavoring, the continue endeavor. I don't think there's going to be much happening in the hills, but it was a substantial part of what we would offer at Del Norte Patients Together was products that were produced in timberland, and you know, I would say between a couple families, you know, over $100,000, you know, a year. I don't know if you're going to, I think that the community that we do need to invest in, like I keep saying, any opportunity to add GDP, to our community, to add revenue going on. There's seeds, sometimes you're not going to see the fruit that you're going to need right off the bat. Environmentally, I think we've tried to structure these to be small enough to where we're not going to, well, not really even to where we're not even really going to see them and smell them, and so it is really in the spirit of what Prop 64 was about, and the Medical Use Act that happened the year before that, was to bring in participants that were in the industry. In the industry as it existed, into full compliance, and so there's a huge potential for environmental harm, in the gray market, and when times are fun and nobody, if anybody looks, you're in trouble anyways. But that's not the case anymore. These are all going to be set up where people are going to have their nerves racked in case anybody comes and visits, to inspect their operation, and that was never a factor in this industry before. There was no inspection, there was a raid. So there, no one was really planning for, anything other than going to prison, let alone environmental damage. So I really think that the size and scale of these little things, and the demand, like Jesse says, there's not going to be a huge demand to go up into our hills and do any sort of business, really. And yet we do want to retain, I think, what business we do have, and I think we have seen a lot of it leave our county over the last decade, as the state north of us opened up a market. I've seen people that did operate here go in there and become licensed and all, and so we see revenue, leave the community, and we want to do everything we can to keep it here. I lost a neighbor who was a fisherman, and I don't think that fishing license is ever going to. There's a small fishing license, and I don't think it's being passed on. So it's another little form of, a couple half of a season's jobs and one person's livelihood, that's not going to be cycled into our community. And we're at a point economically where we really got to, put these buckets out and catch what drops are falling. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Hello. Good morning. Aaron Skroback. We'd like to thank the board for continuing this discussion on outdoor commercial cultivation. Believe that most voters were under the assumption that those who were growing in the past would be able to continue to do so in the legal marketplace. Understand that this may take some time to accomplish, as an amendment to the general plan could be lengthy. Yet this is an important goal to achieve, and urge the board to make this possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, I just got to revisit this, and I think with what Mr. Dorico and Mr. Skorback just said, in the spirit of Prop 6 and the vote of those folks here in Del Norte County, we have to try to make an effort to get this thing right. And I don't disagree with anything that Ms. Cooper has brought up or anything that Ms. Sutter has brought up specific to whether it's a specific herbicide or pesticide that has threatened wildlife in the past, or the degradation that we've seen in Humboldt County and impacts on streams in Mendocino. That has happened. Those are real-time events, and it has occurred. There's a reason the state has come down with a hammer to ensure that that kind of thing doesn't happen again. But it's also why Del Norte County is trying to create, through our ordinances and our general plan, policies that regulate, to ensure that these kind of things don't happen here in our ground. And the only way to do that is to ensure that those folks that are in the cultivation process right now in those TPZ lands come in under those regulations, so they could be essentially monitored to ensure that those environmental impacts do not occur. Without that, they will continue to operate in a not so legal market, and we'll move forward with those environmental impacts. So it's a catch-22. You either do it or you don't. And I want to do it. I want to do it so we can ensure that our county, through our legal processes and our ordinances, are enforced to ensure that we have legal operations that are not only overseen by the State Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Department of Water Quality, but also the County of Del Norte, and that we have a viable business with what remains of our private lands. What remains of our private lands? Remember, you have 80% of our public lands here in Del Norte County. Taking more is not acceptable at this point in time. We've got to survive with what we got left because the current trees out there do not pay our taxes. We do. So remember this going forward. If we have the opportunity to provide an economic development engine, which many have advocated for through Prop 64, we need to take full advantage of it. And if this county could roll out the red carpet, which I'm sure we will, to make the right choice in our general plan to allow something to happen, I want to ensure that it takes place. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anyone else? That was just a presentation. There's no vote to be taken. Before we go on to general government, can we?
Chair,
do you want?
I just want to make the suggestion that we move forward with the moratorium now, since the tribe is here. And
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump ahead to item number 21, and that's to approve and enact the interim ordinance establishing a temporary moratorium on accepting applications for use permits for commercial cannabis activities within the UROC areas of traditional, tribal, cultural affiliation outside the coastal zone as requested by County Council.
I'd make that motion, Chair.
Second.
Any public comment?
Hello, Aaron Skorback. Generally, I am in favor of retail sales and commercial cannabis cultivation, except in this instance. This is their land, and we should respect that. If the Yurok tribe does not want it, then that request should be honored. So I'm not asking for the 4/5 vote needed to pass this urgency ordinance. I'm asking for all 5 supervisors to approve this measure. First, for the initial 45 days, and from there on out, or until they see fit to change their position on this issue, which may never happen, and I'm okay with that. Moral of the story, it's their land, honor their request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jesse Davis, and thanks. I support this moratorium. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. Do you want to talk now? Uh-huh.
I believe that Chairman Ray already responded, and unless you want to hear from him again, that's really what he had to say. It's our belief that the moratorium, one of the reasons I think he jumped up then, is this is a lot of the timberland area. This is an area that's going to have to take some analysis anyhow. It's also one that we are formally making this request for the G to G in the moratorium. So, thank you.
Question? Ellie? It is Ellie, isn't it?
It is Ellie.
Okay,
Thank you,
I
sir.
didn't catch your name.
Yes, Ellie Hoops. I didn't say.
So Ellie, tell us about the moratorium. It's a 45-day moratorium?
It can be extended out after that.
Which can be extended just as the traditional moratorium was before.
That's correct.
To 10 and a half months.
That's correct.
And then what happens during that 45 days goes by pretty quickly. What happens during that?
Our hope is that we would arrange to have a G to G between Yurok Tribal Council and the Board of Supervisors. That's our intention. In the event that that didn't occur within those 45 days, we'd ask that this be renewed and extended out beyond those 45 days.
Supervisor Berkowitz and I sit on the 2x2.
That's correct.
With the tribe, so I'd like to make that arrangement to have that meeting with you in Klamath at your conference room with all the particulars laid out so that there's a plan here. So
all right.
Please put that on your calendar. We'll
Absolutely. And Supervisor Gitlin, if you wanted to advise anyone or invite anyone else, we would be happy to speak to anyone. We understand it may be a public meeting, and that's not something that the tribe is opposed to.
Good idea. So who would you have in mind? Who would you like to see included in this rather important 2x2
That's probably
meeting?
something you guys could take
Well, I'd
up
like to hear
later
what you have to say, Ellie.
As far as we're concerned, whoever you think, and we may have individual people to invite, and that's something I think that there are other meetings that we have to have outside of just this particular moratorium that staff and other people would be invited at. For this particular conversation, since it is a short timeline, if you want that to be individual, then we would invite any of the Board of Supervisors to that. For other meetings where we would need staff and other things, that we do have a list. We've already communicated.
Such as fire services, et cetera. Okay, we'll be in touch on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other public comment? Okay. I have a motion and a second on the floor. Kylie?
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Cowan?
Yes. Okay, now we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. Thank you. Meeting. I'm going to go back to the consent items that were pulled, since we have someone here waiting. Supervisor Gitlin, since you pulled items 3 and 4, why don't you give us your reason for pulling them?
Okay, 3 first. This is a motion to approve and appoint Supervisor Hemmingson as the delegate and the director of the Solid Waste Management Authority, Ted Ward as the alternate. I pulled this because, first of all...
Did you just make a motion?
No, it's not a motion. It's pulling. And
He said that. Continue, please. Move forward.
I pulled this for discussion and not to make a motion, but to question. Previous meeting, it was Supervisor Howard. Now it's been changed to Supervisor Hemmingson. I'm not quite sure what this is all about, why Supervisor Howard decided to pull himself from this list and move forward and substitute Supervisor Hemmingson in there. I'm just questioning. I don't think it's a good fit. I think we have people in here who are interested in serving. I'd like to make the motion to ask Supervisor Berkowitz to serve in that position as the delegate and the director of the Solid Waste Authority, and put a little diversity in this board. So that's my motion.
Do you want to explain it?
Well, I can or you can. I put it on the agenda. It's up to you.
Go ahead and explain the situation.
Well,
he's mistaking what this is
so
about.
we've moved forward with this current position for the Solid Waste Management Authority position to really be the person in attendance at the Environmental Services Joint Powers meeting in Sacramento that RCRC holds, because that's the position around solid waste. Supervisor Hemmingson, as our RCRC member, is already down there during this period of time. And so what ends up happening is if Director Ward cannot make the meeting, Supervisor Hemmingson is already there and could subsequently attend without additional cost to the county. And that's why he's on there and not me. But that's, hopefully that explains a little bit about it.
Yes, go ahead, Supervisor Berkowitz.
I have no problem with Mr. Hemmingson being the delegate, but I do have a problem with just the last meeting that we had as an item, approve and appoint Supervisor Howard as the delegate. It's exactly the same language. And so we approved Supervisor Howard, and then we turn around and 30 days later, we approve Supervisor Hemmingson.
And I think Supervisor Howard was just trying to explain that.
I realize that, right.
To avoid, he's already down there.
I know that, right. What I'm trying to say here is I don't know why we approved Supervisor Howard in the first place when Supervisor Hemmingson is already down there. Why did we make that prior appointment, now have to reverse that? Can somebody explain that?
I believe Howard has always been in that position.
No, that's not.
No, it's not. Okay, I'm going to stay out of that question.
I was the delegate, I'm sorry, I was the delegate before, and I meant to pull that off the agenda. It slipped my notes. I didn't pull it off the agenda. I mentioned that at the meeting, and nobody wanted to revisit it at that meeting. And they said they would just bring it back at the next meeting and we would redo it.
Okay,
that's all.
So it was just an oversight.
I have no intention or a real need to be part of the ESJPA. I think that Mr. Ward should be there at every meeting. Sure. But if he's not, I am down there at the RCRC meeting the day before. They always have the ESJPA meetings the following day. I'll already be there. So for efficiency's sake and cost sake, it would be much better if I was the delegate rather than have to send another person all the way down there and then come all the way back. So
you have no argument for me on that. It's just that I was concerned about Howard being there in the last meeting and then you're there this meeting. You've explained it. It's no problem.
Yeah, it was absolutely an oversight. It was an oversight on my part. I meant to I meant to pull that at the last meeting. I didn't do it, and so we're just rectifying that now.
Okay. Would you like to make a motion, Supervisor Berkowitz?
Sure, I'm looking, okay. Sure, I'll move that we approve and appoint Supervisor Hemmingson as the delegate and the Director of the Solid Waste Management Authority, Ted Ward, as the alternate to the Environmental Services Joint Powers Authority Board of Directors for 2019.
I'm going to second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any public comment? Seeing none, Kylie?
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Chair Cowan?
Yes. And the second item that was pulled was item number 4. Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes. Thank you very much. I pulled this because there are lots of steps here that our Director of Health and Human Services, Heather, are you still here? Okay, good. So I'd like an explanation of why we're having these rapid acceleration of steps. Based on your successful evaluation, I think I supported a 5% increase, and perhaps you can explain it to
This is
us.
not up for the department head to discuss. If you would like me to do that, I can do
Go
that.
ahead.
There are some things here that you have been advised of during the evaluation process that you need to be very careful with as you bring this forward. This is about compensation and compensation only. So I would caution all the board not to bring up anything that comes out of a personnel evaluation. If you would like, the board has the ability to negotiate with an individual unrepresented employee in which appointed department heads are unrepresented. That occurred. This was brought back to the board because the government code requires that all compensation changes with elected officials and appointed officials be done through a public process. That's why it's on the agenda. So at this point, the vote is strictly before the board for whatever step increase the board is comfortable with.
Okay, you've advised me to be very careful, and I'm going to repeat what's written in front of me for the public agenda. This is the approval of a step increase for the Director of Health and Human Services to Step D on the appointed department head biweekly salary schedule based on successful evaluation, effective on the employment date, and approve advancements to Step F in 2019 and Step H in 2020, subject to successful annual evaluation as directed by the Board of Supervisors. Now, I'm reading what is publicly known. What are you asking me to be careful about, Mr. Serena?
Any specific references to an evaluation. Nothing that is on here cannot, this can all be publicly divulged. It has to do with specific parts of the evaluation. So that's what I would just, it was the entire board that I was cautioning. That happens through the closed session process. The compensation process happens in open session.
And what is the compensation process? Let's hear that so we can discuss that.
It's what you just discussed, what you wrote, or what you read. What's in here is the standard steps for an appointed department head and what level is negotiated with the board. At this point, then it's up for the board to make that decision in open session. But as I've explained prior, the standard steps for department head start at an A, end with an H, and then you have other steps for longevity, 25 years with county employment, 30 years with county employment. So anything between the A and the H is something that can be considered by the Board of Supervisors through any type of negotiation process.
Well, in my 6 years on this board, I've never seen an item like this placed on the, first of all, the consent agenda, and then open for discussion. So I'm asking about the impact, and we can't discuss the impact of those financial decisions made in closed session. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, that's not what you're
Okay, go
hearing.
ahead.
And every department head has had an item on the agenda whenever there's been an evaluation, a successful evaluation, and any step increase. Every one of them are on there. That's why
Even when there are multiple steps?
Even when there's multiple steps.
I've never seen it before.
I don't understand your question, but then
No,
your other
I know
question.
you don't understand. I've seen step increases, but I haven't seen this acceleration year 1, year 2, in this case 2019, 2020. I've not seen that.
That's correct. You have not seen that.
Okay, so that's what I'm bringing to the attention of the public at this point. Well, I have some issues with it, and I have some difficulty accepting it for my own, for a set of reasons that involved the people who work under this department, who come to us almost on a weekly basis or whenever we have a meeting begging for more money, and we're making these decisions to do this, and I'm uncomfortable with making the decision to jump these rungs of the ladder at this time.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the step increases as outlined in consent agenda item number 4.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any public comment?
Linda Sutter. I don't know what goes on behind closed doors. I do know that public information allows us to see, or California transparency allows us to see your folks' wages, everybody in this room that works for the county, state, or otherwise. I don't know how Ms. Snow successfully completed her evaluation. I don't care. But I do know she's costing this county $160,000 because she pulled out of a excuse me, lease agreement. That is frivolous government spending. That is outrageous. And I'm alarmed by it. Now, I know I could bring up some sore spots here, Madam Chair, but I won't do that, okay? And you probably know what I'm trying to say. I won't mention anything about bankruptcies. So financial, you know, the ability to make a financial decision as a department head costing this county money we don't have, and then giving her a raise whenever people below her are struggling to put food on their table is outrageous and uncalled for. There's nothing in this county that costs you that much money. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more public comment? I have a motion and a second. Kylie, could you?
Before we move forward, I'd just like to say, Madam Chair, I know some folks were absent maybe at some of our last meetings when we increased and through a 3-year plan increased wages for a lot of our folks that we're talking about here in Health and Human Services. And I think, and I'm not speaking out of turn by any stretch of the imagination, Director Snow has done an incredible job for this community given what she was left in and came to back during a transition period that was very tough for the Department of Health and Human Services. And I absolutely commend her publicly for the work she has done in that department to bring us back to the level of services that we're currently at.
Thank you, Supervisor Howard. Any other comments from the board?
Sorry.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I think it needs to be clarified that through the government code, this is a requirement for transparency for all appointed and elected compensation changes. It happens on a regular basis. You're going to see others come up through this year as the board evaluates department heads. But you also have to be aware that agreements that are in place, negotiated agreements with the employees, also include annual step increases for all successful evaluations. This is nothing out of the ordinary. This is typical. And other employees are able to go through that process, and it's not put on a public agenda. It's not required by the government code to do that. So I just want the public to understand as we go through that, we have multiple agreements that cover every one of our employees, and then we have non-represented employees, which includes the Board of Supervisors. But as you go through this, on any given day, we're processing raises for employees consistent with those agreements, and those step increases are just constant.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Madam Chair, if I could,
Yes.
you know, I have to echo the sentiments of Supervisor Howard also with Ms. Snow. She really has done an outstanding job. And this lease agreement was not part of her doing. She's trying to undo something that was done by a previous director, and she's trying to fix this situation, and she's gone to great lengths to try to utilize the facility, to use it in another fashion for the county. She's gone to a lot of lengths to try to make this work, and it's something that maybe we shouldn't have gotten into, and she's trying to get us out of it. And whether you think it's a cost or a cost savings, that's due to, that's your own interpretation. In my feeling, I think it's a cost savings to the county, and so, a lot of this criticism is certainly not warranted.
Thank you, Supervisor. Kylie, we have a motion and a second. Can you pull the vote, please?
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
No.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Cowan?
Yes. Okay, let's off this consent. We're going to go on to general government regular item number 17, approve and adopt an uncodified ordinance of the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors authorizing an amendment to the contract between the County of Del Norte and the Board of Administration of the California Public Employees Retirement System, and 2, authorize the chair to sign the amendment to the contract with CalPERS as requested by the CAO. CAO Serena?
So these are the final 2 steps in ensuring that the CalPERS contract that we have includes the jail employees as retirement, as safety retirement. It's been a long process in going through this, and going through CalPERS to get any type of an amendment takes a lot of time, but these are the final 2 steps. And the jail staff will now be officially in the contract. They've been getting the retirement since the board made that decision almost 2 years ago, so this is the final 2 steps.
Great.
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any public comment? Seeing none. Kylie?
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Cowan?
Yes. Okay, moving on to item number 18, approve and authorize by a 4/5 vote an extension to the emergency action previously identified at the December 11th, 2018 Board of Supervisors meeting based on the need to continue said action for the abatement, demolition, and cleanup of outbuildings located at 2650 West Washington Boulevard, that's the Agricultural Department, based on 22035 and 22050 of the California Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act, and make a finding based on substantial evidence that the emergency still exists as requested by the CAO. But I believe Tony, myself, would you like to explain?
Back on December 11th, as you all know, we voted to you voted to establish the emergency action to abate, demolish, and remove the outbuildings at the Ag Department that Trendell deemed to be an imminent danger to our employees, volunteers, and the community. Because of the timing with the holidays and the weather, we haven't started. We are under contract with a contractor to do that. He is currently putting together the bonds necessary to begin the work, and also the information that he needs to file to obtain the environmental portion of the work that has to be done before he can actually go out and abate the asbestos. So based on that, the California Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act requires that I come back to you at each meeting until the work is finished in order to provide you with an update and to get approval from you to extend the existence of the said emergency. I'm asking you to continue the emergency action to allow the contractor time to complete the necessary environmental paperwork and bonding, and provide them with time to work around the erratic weather, unfortunately, this time of year, to begin the abatement, demolition, and cleanup of the site.
I'd make that motion at this time, Madam
Second.
Chair.
I have a motion
Madam
and
Chairman,
a second. Any,
Thank you. I have some comments to offer.
okay, I was going to go to public comment first, and I'll come back.
You
Is that
can do
okay?
that.
Any public comment?
When I first read this, Linda Sutter, I was concerned about how it was going to be conducted because, you know, there is a covenant to restrict use of property, environmental restriction that's been in place for several years. And I do understand you have to go through EPA to get some sort of soil management plan approved. And I guess that's what those bonds are for. That's all I want to know. I was concerned about that because that's been a sore spot for me for a while because of the people that are out there already walking around. They have no idea that there's not even supposed to be human people out there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more public comment? Bring it back to the board. Supervisor Berkowitz.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Back in the 1960s, this site was declared a site where contaminated waste was mandated by the federal government, where contaminants from all over the county was to be deposited. In fact, records were kept as to what needed to be deposited. In the 1990s, the area was declared a Superfund site and was supposed to be cleared of all contaminants. At the same time, all of those entities like the lily bulb growers and the county itself were hit with large fines by the EPA because they followed federal rules and contributed to now what is defined as a hazardous waste site. So my question is, are we under the restrictions of the Superfund site, and will we be in violation of any restrictions if we disturb the soil at that site?
I think CAO Serena has an answer to that, or?
The answer to both of them would be no. The area of concern that you brought up, Supervisor Berkowitz, is a fenced-off area that is to the northeast of where these buildings are. These buildings are in the developed area right around the ag office and the kennels. That site is in the back and has been under the requirements of testing for many, many, many years. And as such, they're really unrelated.
And what are the requirements of, or what are the results of those testing?
Well, the last that I had heard, and this has been a few years ago, and I don't know if Heidi's still behind me or not.
Yes.
She might have some better information,
Okay.
but
Thank you.
relatively clean.
All right.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. There are 2 wells that we are still monitoring, and actually our last collection of samples was in November, and I'm unsure what the results are, but we're getting down to very, 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 very fine amounts to the point where US EPA would be willing to sign off, but we're still working with the California Department of Toxics and Substance Control. So likely we may have, you know, a 3-year period where we'll come back and do some more measurements. But the earth disturbing, that would be within the area that they actually did the cleanup. And as Jay pointed out, this is clearly outside of those areas.
That's all I was concerned with.
Thank you, Ms. Constable, for that clarification. Supervisor?
I was out there recently, and the buildings are dilapidated, and they're dangerous, and they have to go. Any further sustaining of those buildings in their current condition is going to be another problem. So I appreciate your making your comments, Ms. Sutter, about the EPA getting involved in the toxicity of the soil, but I think there's a greater good here, that these buildings need to be abated, they need to be removed, and they need to be removed now. So I will support this motion for emergency action identified at our previous meeting to demolish and do the cleanup at 2650 East West Washington.
Okay, we already have a motion and a second. Kylie, if you could pull the vote, please.
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Cowan?
Yes. We're going on to item number 19, conduct a public hearing for approve and adopt the ordinance regulating shopping carts, and 3, direct the clerk of the board to publish a summary of the ordinance within 15 days as requested by county council. So, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So at the last meeting, the ordinance was introduced. It's the product of the board's discussion regarding shopping carts for the last several months. There was a 2x2 held with the city, in which case the board members present decided it would be useful to have a similar ordinance to the city regulating shopping carts. So California law allows for certain things to be done in this regulation area and makes certain things a misdemeanor if the county requires signs on the shopping carts. So this ordinance really follows California law, and I think we talked about it in more detail at the last meeting. But it's kind of twofold. It's both additional punishment for those who remove or take from the premises or have a shopping cart outside of the parking lots, premises of the stores, and also requires an abandoned shopping cart plan, which could be wheel restrictions, it could be the long poles, it could be any of that from the store owners that have shopping carts. So it's our ability to regulate in this area, the state has provided that for us, and it really follows the state law as to what we're allowed to do and the notice times. So we don't really have a lot of ability to change that portion, but it is an extra handle for the county.
Thank you. Any public comment on this item at this time?
Hello, Aaron Skirback. Abandoned shopping carts continue to be a blight on this community. I've seen several all over the city and county from virtually every store that utilizes them. Personally, have picked up and returned 24 since the last Board of Supervisors meeting 4 weeks ago. We'll continue to do so once or twice a week until stores can enact a working policy towards retrieval. But even if all measures fail, taking them back is a small favor to the county that I and others can do to make this town a better one. Now, not everyone has a vehicle capable of returning a shopping cart. There are other ways that people can make small contributions to help around town. Even something as simple as picking up litter in your neighborhood can make a huge difference in how it looks and feels. We live in the most beautiful place in all of America. Let's take pride in what we have here by helping to keep it clean for everyone. Also, please vote to approve this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any comments from the board? Aaron, I want to personally thank you. I know that you and I believe your wife have been out there and picking up carts, and it's noticeable, and I appreciate it. I think it's very important for community members to get involved. And you're right, you know, my kids are taught, you truck it in, you truck it out, and you pick up more. You know, I try to do that every time I go for a walk, and I think that's the beauty of the small community. I think there's a lot of people who do those things, and I really appreciate what you and your family are doing. Thank you very much. I will entertain a motion.
Make that motion.
I thought, do we have board comment?
Sure.
Liz, with all due respect, I respectfully disagree with you on what more we can do. This is an empty ordinance. The real culprits of this problem, Mr. Skroback, are the people who take things. They steal. There's thievery going on. Each one of these carts is $250, $350 or more, and they're used as vehicles. And many of them end up in the bushes. I just related to Sheriff Apperson about a new homeless site over in Old Mill Road in Northcrest, and I saw 3 of them sitting there, 2 Walmarts and a grocery outlet. To put the onus on the store owner is wrong. They're doing all they can, and I'm hoping we don't get to the point where they just pull them off altogether. There has to be some personal responsibility for the people who steal. And if you allow this ordinance to go through in its present form, there is no responsibility. People will continue to remove and steal shopping carts. And it's kind of a unique problem here. I've done a little work on this, excuse me, and I noticed that Safeway had a whole bunch of new shopping carts, or so it appeared. They were lapped down all of a sudden. So I began to look at them and to see the ad. There was ads on there, picture ads, and they were from Willits and Ukiah, realtors there. So Safeway has solved the problem by taking shopping carts where there is not a problem, where those shopping carts are being removed, and shifting them up here to this store, which ultimately, even with their little device there, someone with a Phillips screwdriver can remove it. So I'm going to reject this ordinance because it doesn't go far enough, and we must have enforcement of these so-called little crimes, because they are a blight in our community. They are a traffic hazard. They are all kinds of problems that are posed by people who take things that don't belong to them, and I'm hoping I'll have some consensus in opposing this ordinance in its present form, and we should bring this back and look to make amendments to increase the penalties for those who steal these shopping carts. Thank you.
Board, if I may address that briefly, there's a section 6, it's proposed section 7.55.60 that states that it is unlawful to do any of the following, and it has a list. To remove a shopping cart, to be in possession of a shopping cart with serial numbers removed, to leave or abandon a shopping cart, and it makes that a misdemeanor. So we can't make it a felony under California law. California law allows us this ability specifically, that's in the Business and Professions Code. It allows us to make this a misdemeanor. It doesn't allow us to make it more. So, you know, in terms of the ordinance not having what you want in it, or having, changing it to be something else, we're limited on what we can do in terms of that. You know, California has decided that the maximum you can do is make it a misdemeanor. So that's
Liz, I'm going to ask you this question.
Doing.
What are the consequences for committing a misdemeanor when someone is stealing continually or removing property that is not their own? It could be a shopping cart, in this case it is, or shoplifting in general.
So this ordinance is additional to what already exists. So theft, you know, stealing, all of those things are separately chargeable. This just allows, if someone is going to be charged, it allows an additional crime to be charged, and that's particularly this section. And in terms of, you know, what kind of penalties does a misdemeanor have, that's not something that we can do with this ordinance. And that would be charged through the DA. It would depend on whether or not they were actually arrested, and we can't change that. That's set by California law. We can't change the consequences of a misdemeanor or the sentencing, you know, of somebody via a county ordinance.
Thank you. So I'll entertain a motion. Did you want to
I'd make that motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? A motion and the second. Kylie, could you please pull the vote?
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Gitlin?
No.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Cowan?
Yes. Item number 20, approve and authorize the chair to sign a letter of support for the U.S. Forest Service's California Climate Investments Forest Health Program Grant Application. Authorize the Community Development Department to be a primary partner in the grant application by sending a letter of participation as requested by the Community Development Department Director. Good afternoon again.
Good afternoon again as well. Okay, the title pretty much covered what we're asking for. We were invited by the U.S. Forest Service staff to attend a meeting to discuss the possible idea of participating in this grant application, which will be administered by CAL FIRE. The Talawadini was also invited. We all are partners in those National Fish and Wildlife Foundation projects, which have a goal of reducing fuels within the forest. And likewise, this grant application, if it is to move forward, is looking at treating approximately 1,500 acres within the forest. The County Roads Division would be responsible for roughly 100 acres, which would be located adjacent to French Hill Road and Big Flat Road, which are county maintained roads, we would do roadside mastication. The Talawadini would treat a specific small area, and then the remaining portion of the project would be contracted out to the private sector. The one unfortunate thing that we're facing is because of the federal government shutdown, we have not been able to communicate, obviously, with U.S. Forest Service staff, and the deadline for the grant application is, I believe, later this month. So I'm not sure whether or not it's going to go anywhere, but I think it's still, assuming your board supports us being a participant and or supporting the project, it would be prudent to still take action today, so we will be prepared, and if by any chance the state allows maybe an extension of time, which would be wonderful, we could get everything together.
That's great. Move to approve and authorize the chair to sign a letter of support.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Any public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. Any questions for Heidi? Kylie, could you please pull the vote?
Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Chair Cowan?
Yes. Okay, moving on to budget transfers. We got 22, approve and adopt budget transfer 12-04 in the amount of $73,250 within the Agricultural Commission budget 101-251 for the result of the county insurance company deeming the two dilapidated unusable outbuildings and omit danger of liability for the county as requested by the CAO.
Move for approval.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Any public comment? Bring it back to the board. Kylie?
Chair, just a point of order. Usually the budget transfers are taken up together as one.
Okay.
If we can just correct the motion to approve.
And I'll also amend the motion to approve budget transfer 12-07 in the amount of $30,000 within the Roads Division budget unit to allow for the purchases of needed road materials as requested by the Director of Community Development.
Thank you.
And I'll modify the second.
Okay, Supervisor Gitlin?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Berkowitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Hemmingson?
Yes.
Chair Cowan?
Yes. Okay, moving on to the legislative and budget issues. Consider miscellaneous legislative and budget matters pertinent to the county. Do you have anything for us?
We have no letters or such today. I will give the board an update that we'll be beginning the mid-year budget review and any changes that might come from the new governor as he takes office and puts at the mid-year there.
Great.
Chair Cowan, if I could also mention at this time that as Assemblyman Wood's bill begins to move through committee here in the next several months, he will be introducing it in January as a bill, and that is the community benefits bill. Hopefully we could stay on top of this, both staff and the board, to ensure that when it does go before committee that we are there in Sacramento to help support the process and itself working that bill through Sacramento, both the Assembly and Senate.
Absolutely, and also this month we need to keep in consideration for last chance grade as well. They'll be going back to California Department of Transportation, and we will be seeing, we'll be needing to put out a letter as well to them, and that request will be probably coming by the end of the month. We're already in January, so we'll watch that as well. Okay, ready to go on to board reports? Supervisor Howard, would you like to start us off? That's going to stop next meeting. But for now, let's just make it note that Mr. Gitlin once again has left the meeting for reasons unknown to all of us.
Thank you, Supervisor Cowan. Yeah, we haven't had a lot of meetings since our last meeting in December, so there's a few items I want to go over real quick. First five families board meeting, a discussion with Supervisor Hemmingson and Community Development Department on Wonder Stump Road issues and daylighting. Also follow-up meetings with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife on issues around elk and also Lake Earl. and some steps that we're trying to take out there with the Department of Fish and Wildlife to get further action on all the great progress that was made through the cleanup. Also had a discussion with innovator. In this case, her name was Natasha Asbell. She came to me through a friend of a friend, but she's been creating technology around drones, specifically that deliver water to fire locations and would avoid the use of human-powered aircraft. These drones are capable of carrying large quantities of water and could be put on a satellite point within a fire region that's inaccessible by any other means than air, and put these fires out long before they have a chance to develop into further action. And I connected her with our local forest supervisor, Jeff Morzell, and they had a great discussion. So hopefully some of those conversations will move forward on some of the new tech that's being developed out there that can prevent forest fire in our neighborhood moving forward. Attended a climate science symposium for the North Coast down in Eureka. It was very interesting to listen to a day and a half worth of discussion about sea level rise and how it's affecting the state of California in particular, especially Eureka, Arcata area right now. We're very fortunate as Eureka, Arcata seems to be sinking. Del Norte County is actually on the rise, so our landmass is actually increasing in elevation, which doesn't put us in harm's way like our neighboring county. But in essence, it was an interesting symposium on how to deal with some of the future results of what they felt were issues around sea level rise and climate change. Attended the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority meeting where we made some changes on rate schedules. Also had a great deal of discussion with Elk Valley Rancheria on potentially moving forward an MOU with the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors around cannabis. Hopefully we could have some discussion soon about this, maybe this month even, on what Elk Valley is requesting. Attended a Resource Conservation District meeting in Smith River where State Groundwater Management Act discussions were hot and heavy on the plate. And as you've heard from recent meetings that we heard last week, that Department of Water Resources has reprioritized the Smith River Basin from a medium priority to a very low priority, which our data, our facts, and all the hard work of our staff and our private entities out there, and also the diligence of our Board of Supervisors, paid off after 2 years of hard work. You know, this seems like a quick just mention, but let me tell you guys, this was a really heavy lift for everybody, and trying to get real data and real facts into a process in a model that didn't have the correct facts and data was a heavy lift. So thank you again, everybody, for all your efforts around that. In particular, Randy Hooper, who is no longer with Community Development, but did a lion's share of the work, including Linda Crockett of the Del Norte County Farm Bureau. Also want to make mention of a meeting that we had with Randy Hooper and our sister city 2x2 committee that we formed recently down at the new to be constructed airport terminal. We're in initial discussions about bringing forward through that 2x2 committee to the JPA possible display for Rikuzen Takeda as they enter our new terminal. We're working through what the details of that might look like, but I think all of us have some vision a vision of very welcoming to our new travel trailer community, and this could emphasize that. Participated in agenda review, and then in addition, a lot of discussions with Assemblyman Wood's office and Liz Snow on draft legislation that we're going to be presenting this month here in Sacramento. Conference calls with Department of Water Resources and Natural Resources Goals Committee meeting that I attended with Supervisor Hemmingson. And I want to end and close by some of the great work that Tamara Layton has done. I know Supervisor Hemmingson and Supervisor Cowan have met with California Transportation Commission this last year and really trying to bring the California Transportation Commission, the funding arm of Caltrans, to Del Norte County, specifically see Last Chance Grade. And Tamara, through communications with the director of the California Transportation Commission, Susan, has agreed to have a town hall in Del Norte County. We're going to roll out the red carpet for these guys. In particular, we're going to roll out a red carpet both visually flying over last chance grade until these guys understand the full impacts of what last chance grade means to this community. But to have a town hall up here is a first for our community, and to have that many representatives from the Transportation Commission here will be great. We're looking to do it this fall, which will give us some time to plan, but great work to staff, and in particular Tamara Layton, for helping to make that happen, including both Supervisor Hemmingson and Cowan. That's the end of my report.
Thank you. Supervisor Berkowitz.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Since our last meeting, I attended the Grants and Goals Committee with Supervisor Gitlin. We approved the proposals with 2 items as priority items: the $250,000 for the court-appointed special advocates, CASA, and $250,000 for the Del Norte Senior Center Senior Nutrition Program, and these were approved today on the consent agenda. Had a meeting with Ted Price, the CEO of Go Invest, which is a program that develops actuarial programs for counties. And I finally took some vacation time, and my wife and I traveled to several islands in the Caribbean. Madam Chairman, I'd like to propose an agenda item for next meeting. As you know by now, that the U.S. House of Representatives is under new management. This has the possibility of providing great dividends for Del Norte County, as Congressman DeFazio is now chairman of the powerful Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. This committee may be tasked this year with writing a new bill to provide improvements to roads, bridges, tunnels, and other transportation. Congressman DeFazio has been to Del Norte County. He knows the problems we have with last chance grade. When he was here in 2017, he said this about last chance grade, quote, "This is a must-do project. I would assume it would get high priority," unquote. Now he has the chance to do something about it, especially if we get earmarks back, which the president has said he supports. In light of this new development, I would ask that a letter be sent to Chairman DeFazio reminding him of his commitment to the realignment of last chance grade, and asking him when he plans to hold hearings on the infrastructure needs of the counties, and when he does, can a representative of our county be one of the participants to give testimony? And secondly, will he go on record as supporting earmarks? By the way, Congressman Huffman sits on this same committee and should be copied on the same letter. So I'm hoping we can get that on the next agenda. As a side note, legislation is now moving in the House of Representatives to give states permission for cannabis, and has some support from the Senate, and the President has said he would give it consideration. So we may want to weigh in on this at some time in the future. That's my comments, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Hemmingson.
Yes, thank you. As Supervisor Howard said, we had a staff meeting with some discussion about Wonder Stump Road, and then after that meeting, had a meeting with Fish and Wildlife staff, California Department of Fish and Wildlife staff, regarding Pacific Shores, access points, elk tags, and such. Had a good discussion. We had a Border Coast Regional Airport Authority meeting. The terminal building looks to be completed by the end of the month, and hopefully we'll have furniture and stuff by the end of February and be able to open at that point. Anyway, had a homeless meeting with True North. Supervisor Cowan and I were both in attendance. And I was enlightened. I found out some very useful information that, according to Aaron Goodwin, that veterans have a place to go. There should be no reason for a veteran to be homeless. There are accommodations for veterans. Also, Connie Battles Byrne, that's a hyphenated, is taking the lead on working with students, homeless students. So hopefully we'll get some correction there and deal with the homeless population in our schools. It was also interesting to find out that our homeless shelter that is being run by our Daily Bread only has a 5% occupancy rate. So I find that very difficult with the homeless population that we have, that people aren't utilizing the services that we have in the community right now, and how we're going to be able to expand those services and not have anybody show up. It's kind of baffling to me, but it's nice to know that we do have services out there, you know, that are being used, but that people are making an effort to make those services, I guess, more available. So, you know, we really need to get to the point where the services that we have are being utilized effectively. Also went to an RCD meeting. I went to my granddaughter's assembly, their Christmas assembly. I don't know if you can call it Christmas, I do, but anyway, at Redwood School. Now, I've been dealing with the school district now on the problems with the Redwood School traffic circulation and parking problem for well over a year, and haven't seen anything happening. And I'm really disappointed, because if you've ever been out there when a function is going on, the area is unusable. You can't get through. You don't have a place to park. I mean, people are parked clear to the market, from the school to the market, and every road that's off of Lake Earl Drive is packed with cars. The gym was totally packed. They have great programs out there. It's a great school, and for the school district not to step up and accommodate the traffic and the parents and grandparents, in my case, for those activities, something needs to be done, and I'm going to continue to work on it. So we're going to be working with the local transportation and highway patrol and whoever else we can get involved to get something done out there, because it needs to be taken care of. I had a meeting with staff on Pacific Shores. I went to Bill Follett's retirement. I got sworn in, so I'm here for another 4 years. Whether you think that's fortunate or unfortunate, I'm in the same boat. Also had as Supervisor Howard said, we had a Natural Resources Goal Committee meeting. We talked about fishing game advisory, the local fishing game advisory committee, elk tags, Point St. George Trail, the Klamath River Renewal Corporation, the EIR. You know, there's just a multitude of things that are happening in natural resources in our community, and you know, I got to say, we're pretty weak. We need some help. So hopefully we'll find somebody that can step up and get us some help. Not that they're not doing a good job. Everybody's working real well. It just takes a lot of time. And I know Supervisor Howard mentioned it about our priority level being for the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, for our basin, to be reduced to the very low, from moderate to the very low, and we worked very hard on that. Staff did an absolutely outstanding job, and at every chance, every turn, every place that we could get that information out there on how we were not getting, I guess, the support that we needed to have on that issue, and finally to have it come through. And we were expecting a low level, and for us to get to the very low level, that's a huge accomplishment. It's a big deal. I don't think it can be mentioned too many times, so that's why I thought I'd mention again. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we had an airport authority meeting. As Supervisor Hemmingson said, the tentative date for the grand opening is February 22nd. DeFazio and Huffman both will be in town, so we'll be working on getting them back out to Last Chance Grade. I know the letter's a great idea, but I'd like to have them personally, physically there as well. Attended a meeting on the homelessness with True North, as Supervisor Hemmingson pointed out. And yeah, there was a lot of good things that we found out. It's nice to know that the veterans, all the veterans are taken care of in our county. That is not a problem in our county. The children are there, but we have a great new person at the school district at the helms, as he spoke about Connie. I think she's going to do a great job. And I think if we take it piecemeal, as we've talked about, I think we can get through this. The other part that Supervisor Hemmingson and I are working on the homeless is with McGuire's No Place Like Home, and steps in progress are being made there as well. Attended a solid waste meeting, attended an RCTA meeting, and a big shout out to them this week. They're a big help to us with the Japanese delegation in town. They're going to be help shuffling kids around from the students that are here, because we kind of have two different groups coming in. We had the students come in last night, and we have the teachers arriving on Wednesday. So RCTA, thank you for all your help. Had a conference call with the sister city, 2x2, and the delegation from Japan going over this week's visit. Had a meeting with Randy Hooper. We're talking about marketing options right now at the airport that we're talking about at the airport meeting, but I've been talking one-on-one with him because we'll be sitting down with Sutter Coast Hospital at the end of this month. So we're looking at marketing more geared to them. Had a meeting with the sister city group at the airport, as Supervisor Howard talked about, bringing in some type of display cases and or any way to promote and show and just really kind of, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but just really push the city, sister city, promote it to show people how the good things that are there. Met with Jay to go over the agenda, attended the swearing-in ceremony yesterday for our newly electeds, including Sheriff Apperson, Supervisor Howard, Supervisor Hemmingson. Congratulations to everybody, especially you three. And again, like I was saying, the Japanese students have arrived, so we have a really busy week. I'm lucky enough to have one in my home. I enjoy that very much, sharing our community with them. They come over very excited, whether the kids or the adults. We have so much here in our community, and I get really disappointed when I hear the negativity out there, because there is so much positive, as Chair Howard talked about in his opening statements today. We need to focus more on that. There's just so many good things going on. So when we have people in from out, like the Japanese delegation, I like to share our community with them, and I'm really excited about that. There's going to be a welcoming ceremony at 3:30 Thursday at the Cultural Center. All the public is welcome and invited to come down, and I hope you guys all can. And again, thank you guys for your support. For here as chair, as I said, I went into it nervous. I'm still feeling nervous as I sit here, but I'm also very excited because so much has happened in the last 2 years, and I can't wait for 2019 and all the good things that are going to continue to happen. So that's it. Thank you very much.